Hello everyone, my name is En.
And my name is Yeji, and this is Our Own Canon.
We created this show as a way for us to discuss and debate pieces of art, literature, philosophy, television, film.
Basically, anything and everything that has left an impression on us as Asian American college-age nerds with social anxiety and affinity for Vietnamese iced coffee.
Nerds, which we absolutely are, so get prepared to get lost in the weeds.
But don't worry, we'll offset with enough irony and sarcassery to keep things not boring for y'all.
And of course, thank you for listening and supporting the show. We hope you love what we have prepared today.
Did you do anything fun for New Year's?
New Year's. I mean, Lubbock is not particularly the place you go to like celebrate New Year's, so a lot of it was my own
This
fun
is
that I
true.
made.
Yeah, so what did you do?
I did two things. One, I made this Vietnamese rice cake. It's called bánh chưng. And it's like one of the few recipes that like I know for sure has been around in my family for like literal generations. So I was
wow.
like, I'm gonna do it. And it's a thing we do on New Year's, right? We spend like the whole like day before New Year's doing it. I haven't done it. My family has done it. But this time I was like, I'm out here on my own. I need some New Year's fun, so I'm just gonna do this whole rice cake thing, and it didn't turn out too bad.
Well, I love that for you. You're also a very good cook. I feel like you discount that a lot when you talk about it, but you make good food.
I make.
Speaking from firsthand experience, having tasted your food, you make very good food.
I think if it's steamed or in soup, it's fine. If it's baked, I give up. I can't bake for shit.
I guess that's like where, like, you know how they say like your friends like make up parts of you
Are you a baker?
like that you can't do. Yeah, I'm a baker.
Yes. Do you know how to make
But
baguettes?
see, I can't.
It's very important.
Yeah, I can't make soup. So the last time I tried to make a soup, it was like a chili of some sort, and I was making it with my boyfriend, and I just kind of had to defer to him for everything because like we got all of the ingredients and we sat down to make it, and like as soon as the water got put on the stove, I was like, I can't do this. It's way too much pressure. So I had to like walk away and go into like the other room. Yeah, it's not great, but
All right.
I'm working on it. I'll take pho tips.
You know, I think as long as you can bake and as long as I can make soup, we don't even have to work on our weaknesses. I'll just drive down 4 hours every time I need bread. I'll just take an extended drive. It's very important. Fresh bread.
We're in a recession right now, so like it's probably cheaper to buy like a bag of flour and make your own bread than it is to like go to the store.
You're probably
and
right.
Make your bread.
You're probably right.
This is the weirdest tangent ever.
This went from how do you spend your New Year's to tips to save money,
Which
which is also like
recession.
stereotypically very Asian. So like,
Yeah, let's talk about the economic state of the world right now. That's very productive. Well, I'm glad you like did stuff for New Year's.
How about
My
you?
mom and I never really celebrated like Asian New Year's. We never celebrated. Like sometimes we would do things at our church, like when we went to Korean church, but we didn't have like family traditions. Family traditions that we would do like together. Because for a long time it was just like the two of us, and so whenever there was like a quote unquote special occasion, we would just like eat out. And so I guess like that could be something, like going out to eat at a restaurant, which I did not do yesterday. I had a Korean pear for New Year's because my friend Ash was like, "Did you have an orange for New Year's?" And I was like, "No, I did not have an orange for New Year's." And the only fruit that I had was the Korean pear, so I had a Korean pear instead of an orange. So
you know, you're on your Asian stuff. It's It's in the right direction here.
It
Sounds.
was a Korean
It's a
pear,
very
so
festive
yeah.
Korean pear. Okay, for the a holiday Korean
A
pear.
holiday Korean pear. Yeah, I painted the outside of it red and I put some like gold flakes on it and stuff. And,
And that's why I
yeah.
have food poisoning today.
I also watched Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon yesterday while I was eating my pear, and that's actually what we're here to talk about today. Um, but this was your movie on that you chose for us to talk about, so you want to get us started here?
Yeah. So, I don't know about like for you, but like the background for me in this movie is like I actually have not watched it until we decided to do this episode. Even
Yeah.
though it's like something that like really has piqued my interest for a long time because like throughout my whole life, it's always just been something that I knew about. You know,
Uh-huh.
Michelle Yeoh is like a really popular figure in like the Asian American community, and like
She's an icon. We
yeah,
fucking
and
love
it really
her.
feels like this is the movie where like I really like knew where she was from. Of course, later she has Crazy Rich Asians, and then like the excellent Everything Everywhere All at Once. We will do an episode on that later.
Yeah, dude.
But before all that, like the thing that I really, really, really knew her from was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So like this was been on my list to watch forever. I just needed the excuse to do it. And this is it. The podcast is like 15% just giving me excuses to watch movies.
I love that. So it's interesting that you say that you knew Michelle Yeoh from this movie, without having watched the movie. I think that's like really cool, kind of on like a meta level, because it's like she's known sort of for this role and she kind of embodies like that like kung fu goddess thing
Yeah.
for a lot of her like the beginning of her career. I actually know her from the James Bond movie Tomorrow Never Dies. She was like my mom's icon. Like my mom really liked her in that movie. And so we watched that movie all the time. And so yeah, I remember seeing her in that. And the next thing that I ever saw her in was Crazy Rich Asians, and I didn't realize that it was the same person until I started like looking into the cast for that movie more.
Mm.
It's kind of crazy. I don't think she ever took like a break like that, but she kind of had like a huge startup in her like career, like doing James Bond and then doing like this movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and then she sort of like had another sort of come up recently with Crazy Rich Asians and Everything Everywhere All at Once, and she's in Shang-Chi as well. So
Yes.
she's kind of like, I don't think she ever went away, but like in a way she's also coming back, which I think is really really cool.
I think
Not a lot of people can do that.
if I'm willing to, if I'm allowed to speculate, I do think this has something to do with just like how like cyclical like Asians in like pop culture kind of come and go, right? Like we had that era where like kung fu movies were really big, and then like it kind of just
Yeah.
like died down for a bit, and then like now with like Crazy Rich Asians being really big, it's kind of like back in, right? And
Yeah.
it does. There's probably more factors to it than just that, but it does kind of feel like Michelle Yeoh's like like career trajectory kind of like follows that same little like that same pattern more or less, right? Like she was
Yeah.
big when kung fu movies were big, and then like died down a bit, and then she spearheaded like Crazy Rich Asians coming back for that, and then now like Asians in like pop culture are, like coming back in a way.
Yeah. She was also in the Kung Fu Panda 2 movie, which I really enjoyed. That movie makes me cry like no other fucking movie does. Like, oh my God. We need to do an episode on
I
that just
will
so that
I
I
will
can
do
like
episodes on the whole trilogy. I
cry.
love that
Yeah.
trilogy.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So we're gonna put that on the
We need
list.
to stop making
Um,
promises about episodes we're gonna do in our episodes, because like the list just gets
our
longer and
list
it's
is
gonna be
already
yeah.
way too long.
This is just gonna get worse for us.
Yeah. That's okay though. That just means that we have enough content that we can sort of mess around
Yeah.
with. I'm actually gonna be really honest with you. That was like kind of one of the things that I was worried about going into doing this
Dude, I have
podcast.
the
Was like,
exact
is
same
there
anxiety.
yeah, like is there enough like Asian American media for us to actually talk about and pull from? And so I'm glad that our list is as long and kind of intimidating as it is, because that means that we've like done our work properly. You know?
Yeah, and I also think doing the podcast has made me like look for a lot more Asian like stuff and in the process, I've
Mm-hmm.
been finding a lot more of it. It's kind of a shame that it's not just there in pop culture, and I just know about it like most other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But if you want to look, definitely is there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I would love for you to do your little segment of On's bad recaps, because I think this movie is also like really hellish to summarize because there's so many moving parts and details. Um, but yeah, like just cover what you think that the audience needs to know for us to get going with this
Yeah,
conversation.
gee, I barely made it through. Um, Always Be My Maybe. And Big Hero 6. This is just gonna be tragedy, and you know it. So, and those movies are generally easier to follow. This one is
Yeah.
whack.
This movie is really whack though. I'm excited to get into it. We haven't actually talked about it before we started recording because I wanted like our conversation to be fresh, but also there's the cat if you didn't hear him back there. Snowball.
For all the Snowball fans out there,
For all the
we
Snowball
got Snowball
fans. Yeah.
crashing the party. All right. So before we start, I've been bad at this, but I remember this time I put it on my notes. Spoiler warning ahead. Uh, I do recommend watching the movie before like you dig into this podcast, because like I doubt my recap is going to do it justice. So you're probably better off watching the movie. But if you don't, we're gonna have spoilers with like my recaps and commentary, and probably a lot
Yes.
of Yeji making fun of me for not remembering things.
Also, a lot of me just making fun of this freaking movie, uh, because it's a little weird.
It's pretty weird.
Yeah. So where do we start?
Okay, we start with already on the hot seat. So we start with the introduction of two of our leads, Lee Moonbai, right? That's like the older male lead, right? And then
Uh
Shulin,
huh.
played by Michelle Yeoh. And we get introduced to these two, and Lee Moonbai is coming back from like the mountains, and he's like kind of like, I wouldn't say like hurt. He's like kind of he tried to reach enlightenment and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So he's had better days. So instead of continuing to try to reach enlightenment, he goes back home and he's like, I'm gonna retire from being a warrior. Are those two things related? Like,
I, I I think it. I don't know. Like there's a lot of stuff that there's a lot of stuff that they talk about that they never like there's no exposition in this movie. It's all just people talking to each other and then we just have to glean whatever details that we can from their conversations. And so like from this specific conversation we kind of glean that like they have a history with each other. They know each other from like a long time ago and they're like, you know, close, but also there's like this really sort of I think it's awkward, but like this awkward romantic tension kind of between them. And we kind of figure out later why it's like awkward, but it's very like obvious.
obvious
But
romantic tension is
at the same
obvious.
time,
Yes.
yeah, obvious romantic tension is obvious. But at the same time, like they're talking about a lot of moving parts and they name drop a lot of names that we don't ever really figure out until like much later into the movie.
I'm just
So
still
yeah.
tied up with like how odd it is that like he renounces his like warrior ways after he fails to reach enlightenment. Like I would think you renounce your warrior ways and then you go try to reach enlightenment, but he like did it the other way around. So is that it's like implying that like if he did reach enlightenment, would he still be a warrior? I don't know.
I think that
I'm confused.
I mean I do think also that maybe part of it was that like he couldn't reach enlightenment because he wasn't able to let go of his like warrior spirit and like it's kind of ironic that he gave it up after he stopped trying to reach enlightenment. Um but also like his entire personality is being like a legendary warrior swordsman guy who like everybody knows and so I guess like giving up that part of his personality was not easy, and I don't think he ever does. Like, he says he does in this conversation, but he never actually does. He never stops fighting people.
That is true.
Like, it's 75, like 80% of this guy's screen time is sword fighting, and then the other 20% is staring longingly into Michelle Yeoh's eyes.
Or longingly at Jen, which is like even weirder. But like we'll get to that in a bit. So he's decided to retire, and so he's not gonna be a warrior anymore. So he decides to give his sword to Shulin's or Michelle Yeoh's character, and he wants her to bring it to Surte, because I guess she's gonna be there, and like he can't do it himself. I'm sorry. Okay. This guy does a lot of things that don't make sense to me, and like I'm gonna like gloss over it because like if I keep questioning him at every step, we're never gonna get to the end. So, so yes, he's like, I'm gonna retire. Here's my sword. Give it to this guy. I'm gonna be fuck knows where. It is also at this point. This is like a tangent. It's also at this point where I realized that like I'm watching it dubbed, and there's no way this was the original way it was like meant to be watched.
Oh my god.
Because they're like talking, and like their mouths aren't synced up, and like the voice actors are like really stilted. And I was like, wait a second, there is a sub somewhere. This is not right. I need to fiddle with the settings.
Why did you watch it in dub?
This is where it came default.
Are you serious?
Yes, I found it.
That's so weird.
Yeah, so I like I found like a used copy for like $2 at like a used movie store.
Oh,
so
my
I
god.
put it in.
You watched this on DVD?
Yes, because like this is
Oh.
even if it wasn't something I liked, I knew it's something I want to have, especially if it's $2. um
Oh my god. That's like the most uncle thing I've ever heard.
It is.
I need to have the DVD. I want to watch it on DVD because that's the way that it was supposed to be watched. That's fucking hilarious. Okay,
It
so
was the
you
way it was
watched
supposed to be watched until it came in dubbed. And then I was like, no, this is not the way it's supposed to be watched. This is awful. Where's the subs?
So you watched the whole thing
No,
dubbed?
I watched like that scene dubbed, and then I was like,
Oh.
there's something terribly wrong. I feel very uneasy. Part of that unease doesn't particularly go away by the end of the movie, but that's for a different reason. Tangent.
Oh, that's so funny.
Tangent complete. Get back.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh my god. Wow, that is hilarious. No, the conversation isn't like all that not awkward in the subbed version either. Also, I don't know if this is like I don't know if this is just me, but a lot of the subs for like early wuxia movies, which this is technically a wuxia movie. If you guys aren't familiar with that term, it's basically like heroic martial arts movies. So any movie where the main sort of premise of the plot is around someone either trying to reach heroism or are heroes themselves and are trying to go on a journey to like increase that heroism. So a lot of just general Chinese martial arts movies fall under this category because there aren't a lot of other genres where you can just have like fight scenes erupt out of nowhere if you don't have like a hero going on a journey. And a lot of wuxia movies are also based in like olden times, so that they can really sort of like embody this olden warrior sort of ancient type
like culturally
thing.
nostalgic type thing.
Yeah. So I forgot what I was saying before I started talking about that. Hang on.
Context is important, I think, is the lesson.
Context is important. Wait, what was I gonna say? Oh, in wuxia movies the dialogue just seems very dry. And I don't know if that's just me or because I was watching it subbed and so I'm like reading what they're saying, but the dialogue seems very robotic sometimes.
It might also
and
be because the actors, none of them are native Mandarin speakers. So I think
Yeah, that's actually one of the trivia things that I was gonna bring up, which I think is yeah, but like a lot of times the dialogue just seemed really dry, which is why I think a lot of these conversations do come off as like awkward to people who aren't particularly familiar with the language. Um, but yeah, so trivia about the linguistics of this movie. So like none of the actors in this movie actually came from like the same province, or they didn't like they learned Chinese in a very like standard conversational way, or like phonetically learned Chinese. And so everybody in the movie has a different accent. And the director himself talked about how like he had to do like the first day of shooting, he had to retake one of his scenes like 28 times because the linguistics just were not working, which I think is hilarious and something that like is so unique of a problem for particularly Chinese movies, just because of how like complex and deeply rooted the different dialects are. Like they're basically their own languages and stuff. And so I just think that's really funny. Um, and like you said, it might have contributed a little bit to like the dryness of the conversation, or the weird sort of robotic nature of the way that they were talking, is because they were like speaking language that they weren't particularly comfortable with, or speaking it in a way that they weren't necessarily comfortable with. But yeah, like a lot of the conversations in this movie just are awkward just by virtue of like the vibes are just weird. Okay, I'm sorry.
also
Tangent
I
over.
think some of the I think it's also supposed to be like purposely a little awkward because these two like people have these two characters, and we'll get to that later, like kind of haven't really like figured out their feelings for each other. uh
They're in love, love.
um
Okay,
okay, yeah,
back to the plot.
okay, so we move on to a different location. So much time has passed. Who knows? Like I don't know, some amount of time has passed, and Shulin is now at Certe's mansion, I think is what it is. And she's like giving him the sword, and he's like spitting proverbs and stuff about it, and and he's also like, if like the obvious romantic tension wasn't obvious enough, he's like you should do something, and like if you don't, I'm gonna like talk to him next time, which I thought was
Oh my
just a
god.
little like
Surte coming in here with the wingman,
for real.
wingmanning these two.
um
Yeah.
so yeah, they meet, they talk, whatever. um and is it at this point, does she meet like Jen at this point, or does like this,
Yeah.
okay, so while she's there, the governor is also there doing governor stuff. um and his daughter's there doing governor's daughter stuff.
Governor's
And
stuff.
Shulin runs into the governor's daughter named Jen. I think that's a nickname, but that's
It is a
yeah,
nickname, yeah.
that's how she's gonna be known for the movie. So we'll
But
go with that.
she's like everybody calls her that.
Yeah.
And also like if you watch the sub, like whenever the dialogue will come out and it'll be like a character's name and then a colon and then what they say, it's Jen and not her like legal name. So that's yeah, that's what we're gonna call her.
Okay. So she meets Jen, and Jen's about to get married off in an arranged marriage, and she's all not too happy about it, and she kind of runs into Shulin and is idolizing her, talking about how great it must be to be a warrior. And this is the
Yeah.
first time we kind of see Shulin like react to that. And Shulin's very, she's kind of like pushing against it, right? And the
Yeah.
first time I watched it, it was like kind of odd for me because like this is like a generally modern movie. So it was
Yeah.
like kind of weird to like see like Shulin like push so much for Jen just like accepting the status quo and marriage and things like that. And she keeps telling her like the life is not as glamorous as it seems, and like maybe you shouldn't do this and
Yeah.
just get married. It's gonna be better. So they meet, they have that conversation. For some reason, like Jen still really likes Shulin, even though like she's not particularly like making her feel better about any of the problems she brings up.
Yeah.
To the point where Jen's like, "We're sisters, right?"
Yeah.
I was like, frankly, I don't think you guys earned this.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the confidence and like her enthusiasm in this scene. It's like I feel like the whole movie kind of is emblematic of Jen's journey from like a young girl to like a woman, kind of, and like this sort of, girlish, kind of like naive way of like speaking to a woman that's like much older than her and has like experiences that she wishes she had
Hmm.
is like very emblematic of how she's like meant to be seen
Yeah.
by everybody around her, which also makes the next scene all that much more exciting. So yeah, what's the next scene on?
Wait, what is the next thing? Okay, okay.
It's when she breaks into the freaking palace and steals the green sword that Julian was supposed to bring to Surte. And
Yeji
what
bailing
I
me out
really
here.
loved about, yeah, I actually loved that scene. It's the first fight scene in the entire movie, and it is one heck of a ride. We just kind of see like this masked figure break into the palace and go straight for the sword. Comes in, she kind of kicks some guards' ass, and then Shulian gets involved. And basically, they have a hand to hand fight scene in this open courtyard, and they're like running across the roofs, and it's really, really cool.
It's really cool.
It actually is, and I also want to say that like all of the actors did all of their own stunts for this movie, so you can really like see that, and all of the shots they're not shaky at all. They just kind of follow the actors doing what they're doing. Like none of the roof shots are like shaky or like kind of bouncing with the people who are like running. It's just a still shot of somebody running across a roof. So in that way, like the cinematography is really interesting and really, really cool. And you can also tell that it's completely practical. Like you can tell that they're on wires and it's not like CGI of people jumping around. Given this was an older movie, so like they didn't have a choice but to do practical effects. But I still think that it's really cool, and it was kind of like a diversion from a lot of the movies that are coming out right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. Masked thief breaks into the palace, steals the special sword,
Green
and then
Destiny. I
goes
remember. Yes.
and then she goes ham on Michelle Yeoh, who we know that it's Jen because we can see her face like very clearly multiple times throughout the scene.
Yeah, only like
And like we know it's
Superman's
her.
disguise is worse than Jen's, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we're like, "Oh, like we know exactly who you are." Um and it kind of seems like gradually Michelle Yeoh is also figuring it out. I know that Michelle Yeoh's character has a name, but I still default to calling her Michelle Yeoh.
That's
But
fine.
it, like Shulian's like figuring out who she is, kind of as they're going hand to hand with each other, which I thought was also kind of a cool like detail. Like you can see it in her eyes that she's like, "Who are you? Like who trained you?" Which is another like line that she sort of drops like during the fight scene is like Jen drops a move and she sort of like floats away, and then Shulian is like, that is a move that I recognize because I was trained under that same like martial arts. I want to
Bro.
say it's like a house. I don't fucking know, but it's like
I think
a
it's
it's
like a
like a
I
division
think
or
it's like a martial
something.
arts discipline.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's called Wuhan. I think that's what they call it in the
I
movie.
think so.
I watched the movie, guys. I promise. I'm just bad at details. Yeah, Wuhan. Um,
Oh, I think it's Wudang,
so she's like,
right?
am I this is what I wrote in my notes, and I think that's probably what showed up in this sub.
There is a good chance we watched different subs.
There is a good chance that I'm messing something up here, but basically she recognizes the martial arts that Jen is doing, and this is a clue. It's something that comes up again later,
Hmm.
but yeah, the fight scene's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, what did you think about the fight scene?
I thought it was
Did you
cool. It
like it?
was fun. I haven't like watched a lot of like the old school like martial arts movies. I just haven't, and like it's really nice to appreciate the camera work just staying still and letting you appreciate the martial arts instead of like the more western style where
Mm-hmm.
action scenes tend to get very choppy and you don't get to you feel the franticness of it, but you don't get to appreciate like the choreography of it as much, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying it's particularly a bad stylistic choice how the western movies do it, but
Mm-hmm.
lose some of the it does lose some of like the fun of just like watching a well choreographed like martial arts scene. Uh,
Yeah. I also want to say that there was something really emblematic and also surprising to me because I did not know what this movie was going to be about when I went into it. Like you, this was a movie that I'd heard about, that I knew about, but never had actually like watched. I maybe watched it when I was really, really young, like with my mom,
mhm.
maybe when I was like 5 or 6, because I do remember this movie specifically like being something that I was like, yeah, I know that movie. You know, like that was like my initial response to it. But when I watched it, I just had no recollection of what was going on. So, but like, there's something really cool about the fact that the first intense fight scene, the first fight scene at all in this movie, and also like most of the other fight scenes later in the movie too, are between the two female main characters. That was something to me where I was like, huh, that's cool. That's actually really cool.
Yeah.
Like I'm used to, and also like particularly in Chinese martial arts movies, I'm used to like two men
Hmm.
duking it out. Think like Ip Man or literally any Jackie Chan movie, right? But it was really cool to see this movie sort of take a different approach to it, and also because this movie was like the blueprint for those other movies as well, doing something completely different, which is also really cool. They also do some other interesting things to their female characters later, but what comes next after the fight scene?
All right. So, fight scene. We're at the next morning, and also like a little side tangent on the fight scene. Another one of the characters, I don't remember his name, and he's kind of not that central to the thematic analysis, so I'm not gonna bother too much. But he tracks down like another person going to like the Governor Yu's like palace, right? So like the next morning, everyone's putting like the information together, and Shulin's kind of like she doesn't say it, but like it seems kind of clear that like Shulin's put it together, and like this is probably Jen, right? Because
Yeah.
like they're in the governor's mansion, and like the fighter was like very clearly like a woman that looked a lot
Mm-hmm.
like Jen. um,
Yeah.
so we're sitting with that, and then suddenly Lee Mumbai appears, right? Because like okay, Yeji and I last night we were talking about this, and we were just like like I was just like perplexed about like why this man would like send Michelle Yeoh's character all the way out here. Well, it can't even be that far away because like he appears like the next day.
Yeah. I think okay, cuz the yeah, I was trying to like find an explanation for this like on the Wikipedia like summary or whatever, but they just don't ever explain why Li Mubai didn't just fucking deliver the sword himself. Like I guess to further the plot and to have like Shulian present in the plot, like there needed to be some way to like get her involved, I suppose. And so like perhaps that was the like from a writer's perspective, like that was the way that they were going to go about that, but like it makes no sense within the plot at all. And I kind of wish that they had like done a little bit more work to like justify why she was there. She does like own her own like private security company, which I think is actually like fucking interesting and something that I want to talk about a little bit more because we love female entrepreneurs. So like maybe that's the reason, is because she's just experienced at dealing with like protecting like precious cargo or whatever, but like Li Mubai doesn't need protecting. Like if he wanted to just I don't know what is going on. Like the sword didn't need protection because if Li Mubai had it on him and was using it to like fend off people who wanted to maybe like steal it from him, he was unstoppable. And also, we can't even use this like, oh, he's like denounced swordsmanship, so he can't even touch the sword anymore. That's wrong. Like, he picks up a sword
So quickly.
literally 5 minutes after he gets to the estate. So, like, none of the explanations make any sense. And yeah.
I do think you make a really good point that it might just be like a writing decision because like Lee Moonbai does have a tendency to like really force his way into scenes when he's present. Uh and letting Michelle Yeoh's character, dang it, you got me saying that too now. Letting Shu Lian just have like those scenes really like puts you into like her feeling like she's the main character for like this whole like
Yeah.
first, I don't know, like half hour of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And like just kind of sidelining him for a bit does a lot of work towards like framing Chu Lian in that way, which might be important later on how like the frames of like who's anchoring the story changes throughout the movie.
Yeah.
We'll get back to that later. So
Yeah.
he appears and she's like, "I'm sorry, your sword got stolen," and he's like, "What? That's not even why I was here."
I
Implication
didn't even
being,
know that was happening.
yeah, implication being that like he was probably here for like Shu Lian, but you know they're always awkward about it because yeah,
It's so weird because then why didn't he just
go
like,
with her, right?
oh my god,
They would
like
have probably enjoyed that trip together. Like,
because also like the implication there is like, oh, like I came for you so that we can like fulfill the promise that we made to each other, and I'm like, then why didn't you just propose to her in like the 20-minute conversation you guys had at the beginning of this movie?
she even told him to come with me, and he said no.
Like, no, yeah, she's like, do you want to like come with me? And he's like, no, I can't. This like has to be like your journey or something like that. Like, I don't know. I don't even know from a writing perspective if that makes any
Wait.
sense too, because
Can I just recap the timeline real quick? Okay, so that's what happened. He arrives at Shu Lian's place. Shu Lian says, "I'm going. Come with me. I'll take your sword." Blah blah blah. Right? And he's like, "No." Right? And then she gets there. And then he gets there about 24 hours after. Like the next day, he's there. So between him saying no, I'm not gonna go with you, and 24 hours, he changed his mind and then left.
it's so weird. Like, it's so weird, and it's never explained. But he's there now, and that's it. He's there.
All right.
And also he gets like really mad during that conversation when he figures out that like someone stole the sword, and it's like, oh, it's like a female thief, then it must be like the Jade Fox who we find out in a little bit like killed his master on the mountains.
Yeah. When in the
And so Jade Fox is a new character now that we haven't been introduced to yet, but know exists. And we know that she's also like a female assassin / warrior of some sort.
Mhm. All right. So yeah. So he's all like upset. He picks up his sword. He's like, "I gotta avenge my master," and like. I even think Shu Lian points out like, didn't you like renounce your ways? And he's like, "I'll make this one exception."
This is the last time.
This is the last time. I swear. I mean, he kind of is, but he doesn't know that yet.
Good lord.
Uh. Okay, so we also get a couple scenes. Shu Lian talks to Jen, and Jen's like doing the whole calligraphy thing, right? Shu Lian asks Jen to like write her name in calligraphy, and Shu Lian like makes that really fun comment where it's just like, you know, those are like the hands of like a fencer or something like that. You know, like your strokes are very
Yeah.
precise, and cluing us in
Yep.
that Shu Lian, like, if it wasn't obvious before, right, it's very clear now that Shu Lian definitely does know.
Yes.
So later that night, along with a couple other characters, those characters' inclusions are weird, but I'm not gonna dwell on it too much. Along with a couple other
Yeah.
characters, I believe it is they track down Jade Fox in the middle of the night, and they get into a whole fight. and Jade Fox is doing pretty well, but she's also kind of outnumbered. So like it seems like Jade Fox is on the ropes. Then she like kills a dude, and then like people get really upset about it, and then Lee Moonbai like is about to like take down Jade Fox, I believe, or was it Chulian?
No, so
Oh yeah, go for it.
we promised that we watched this movie. Anna's just not good at recaps.
They've gone through enough
So
episodes of this show to know that that my analysis section are much better than my recap sections.
so basically, like there's two guys and one girl fighting with Jade Fox, and the two men are kind of like. So there's one guy who's like super proficient, and he turns out to be a policeman. There's like a very short conversation right before this where like the policeman gets introduced to that guy and his daughter. And it's revealed that that guy and his daughter, like his wife, so the girl's mother, was killed by the Jade Fox. And the policeman has been tracking the Jade Fox all across the country, and she's finally ended up here. Like that's where like her trail ended. And so the policeman, he's undercover, but he's basically here to like kill the Jade Fox. And so she finally like appears, and the three of them, the father, the daughter, and the policeman, get into this like, you know, brawl with her basically. And she is mainly fighting with the policeman because they're the most evenly matched. But like throughout the scene, Jade Fox will use the father's like weapon against him and like kind of fight with his body, which is actually like really cool and something that I like really appreciated the fight choreographers for putting that in, because it's like a very subtle kind of humor in the fight scene where she's basically like puppet mastering this guy with his weapon and everything against like the other guy. But yeah, eventually the policeman gets like an axe to the head, which was crazy to watch. Yeah, it's like really intense. And then both Jen and Lee Mubai kind of like arrive in the fight scene as well. And Jen gets the attention of Lee Mubai, who realizes that she's also using like the same techniques and everything, the same way that Shu Lian noticed that she was using like certain techniques as well. And when Lee Mubai sort of starts going after the Jade Fox, they have a very brief interaction where Jade Fox explains why she killed Lee Mubai's master. And she basically says, like, you know, he would sleep with me, but he wouldn't train me or he wouldn't teach me. And then it's revealed that she like stole one of the vital teaching books from the
Still a textbook.
Yeah, like a textbook or something from the, you know, division of martial arts that this is, that I totally remember the name of because I totally watched this movie last night. And yeah, so Jen and Jade Fox managed to escape, and Lee Mubai is left with a few more questions than answers.
Yeah. And so after they fight, Lee Moonbai and Shu Lian have like a really interesting conversation where Shu Lian is like, I knew she would like be interesting to you, right? And he's like, I gotta train her because like she's like a really proficient like wudang master. She's really proficient in wudang. If we don't train her, she's gonna become a poison dragon, right?
Yeah.
And then Shu Lian is like, yeah, but like they don't take women, right? We just learned this very recently.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it's going on in everyone's heads who's watching it. It's like, this is obviously like not gonna work as an idea. Like we just found out this was not gonna work as an idea. But he's like, he just brushes it
Yeah.
off and he's like, we'll make like they'll make an exception. And I'll get more into like why that conversation I think is really important later. So from there, we cut back to. Tell me if I'm skipping anything, but I'm pretty sure we cut back to Jen, and then this is when like Lo sneaks in, right?
Yup.
Yes. So this like threw me
This guy
for
is
like
so fucking
the
weird.
biggest loop, right? Because up to this point, I thought we were watching like a mystery movie, right? Or like some sort of like who's the Jade Fox, right? And then like someone stole a
Yeah.
sword, we're gonna have to track him down, and then suddenly like everything gets revealed like right here, and then we cut to Jen's perspective, and then like a random dude like breaks into her her room, and then they like start making out, and then I'm like, what? I'm very
It was
lost.
a romance movie all
And
along.
this was like when I felt like I just got a grip of the movie, right? Like I finally like it was at this point where it's like I kind of see where this is going, right? We're gonna be
Yep.
like following Lee Moonbai's hunt for Jade Fox or whatever,
Yep.
right? And then it just like 180s on us. We are now with Jen and Lo, and then like a super protracted flashback happens centering on Jen, right? So like I was
It's
so
so
sure our main character is
weird.
gonna be Shu Lin. It was not.
Yeah, no, the so I think that this is the flashback and like this is the moment where the directors were like, okay, we have to like officially establish Jen as the main character because she's the main character, right? But it's super fucking weird the way that they did this because it comes out of fucking nowhere. Like they don't introduce Lo at all, but he comes in and he's like, "I missed you so much. Like I couldn't stop thinking about you." Blah blah. And then they start like just going at it right there. Like and then she's like, "No, like I can't do this. Like I'm engaged now. Blah blah blah." And then like from there, it like the scene just cuts and it's like we're in the desert now and Lo is like it's like very cowboys and Indians, like the way that they film that whole sequence too in the desert, because
Mm,
it's literally like a stagecoach robbery from like an old Western movie. Like Jen
yeah.
and her mother are in a literally a horse-drawn carriage, which like please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a horse-drawn carriage was like a very distinctly European thing. Like I'm pretty sure that noble women in Asia used like palanquins, but they're in a
I don't know.
stagecoach. They're in a literal fucking stagecoach, and Lo, who is like her boyfriend now, I guess, is like he's like this like wild rider. He's like on a horse and he's like waving a sword and doing like a battle cry, and then he like robs the stagecoach and like grabs Jen's jade comb. And then she like she like bodies a horse and takes it down, and then she gets on the horse gets up, and then she chases this guy because he took her comb.
She doesn't body the horse. She bodies the guy on the
Yeah,
horse,
and the
knocking the
horse
horse down in
goes
the
down
process.
with him, which
It's
is
pretty
fucking
badass. Not gonna lie.
crazy. And then yeah, she chases him for a while, and then she like wakes up in his cave, and then they fall in love, and then
You
yeah.
know, I told you to tell me if I'm skipping a scene, and we did skip a scene. We skipped the scene where Jade Fox and Jen are talking to each other, and Jade Fox is like explaining how like Jen knows like Wudong like
Oh
the whole
yeah,
time. It's
yeah,
because Jade Fox stole the manual and then taught it to Jen, and
yeah,
that's why Jen is like oddly very proficient at Wudang, even in that flashback.
yeah,
She's
yeah, yeah,
already
yeah,
learned at that
yeah,
point
yeah.
because she's been taught like since she was 10.
Yeah, yeah. So she's still like kicking ass and stuff. So this is like, yeah, you're totally right. We totally skipped over that. It's also revealed that like Jade Fox is undercover in the palace, and she's like Jen's governess or something.
Yeah.
They've known each other for like years and years and years. But yeah, so Lo and Jen fall in love in this cave, and like they be like,
You
there's
know,
so
doing
much
what you do in
kissing
a
that
cave.
happens in this cave. There's so much like weird and like okay, I appreciate what they were doing, but like the sound mixing in those scenes where you can just hear you can hear their lips smacking when they kiss, and it's so awkward. It's so awkward. It is so gross.
I do feel
Like,
like I do understand what they were trying to do in this whole like flashback, but I do feel like the execution's a bit odd because like on a lot of different levels, I think like the acting's kind of like odd, the sound mixing is kind of odd. I also think like I don't really feel like they earned it. Like going from like
yeah.
Jen like aggressively wanting her comb to like
Yeah.
then them like falling in love. It feels really like I can write it off because like I understand what they were trying to accomplish, but like if I like didn't, I'd be really confused.
Yeah, it's very like you use the word protracted. Like it's very out of left field. Like we don't see it coming at all. And the setting is completely different than the entire setting that we've been in for the rest of the movie leading up to that point. And so when we're like transported to the desert and to this like random cave with this random guy, and like all of a sudden they met and then they're like rolling around in the dirt and then they're rolling around in the cave and then it's like, wait, okay, so they're together, they're dating, and then she's like, it's so weird. And then she's like trying to figure out whether or not she wants to go back home, and they can see like her father's men and stuff like trying to track her down and look for her. And then Lo like tries to convince her to go back to her parents, and then she does. But, you know, we've already seen him like sneak into the palace and go into her room and be like, "I miss you so much." So like now we know that like he was the one who convinced her to leave and then ended up like coming back. It's very convoluted and very weird, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's the flashback.
Long story short, they fell in love, but she had to go back. Also, mythological story about a kid who wanted to heal his like parents' like illness, so he jumped off a mountain.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
okay. I make it sound
Uh,
really weird when I say it like that. It's like this whole like it's portrayed as like this beautiful myth about like this kid who like believes that it's gonna work, so it works, right? And it doesn't sound important now, but it'll be important
yeah.
later.
Yeah, keep your mind on that myth cuz that is important, but yeah,
it,
the whole
it's told
flashback
a
is
lot
good.
better than I just told
Yeah.
it. uh, so we get out of the flashback, and then we arrive in the present, and she like kicks Lo out, and she's like, "I'm getting married. Sorry." Uh, she gives him like the comb back or whatever, or yeah, or one way or the other. I forget. Uh, the comb is symbolic, and like it makes sense, and like I guess there's something to say about it, but not particularly what I want to say. So I'll get it mixed up who has the comb when, but uh, so the next day we're at like the wedding ceremony, and Lo crashes it,
Oh my god.
try
Yeah.
and trying to like get Jen back.
Dude, that scene
And then
is
like
so
he gets
awkward.
yeah, it's very
That
awkward.
scene is so
Uh,
awkward.
and he gets like chased out, and then Shu Lian and Lee Moon Bai stop him, and they're like, "Yeah, dude, like it's not gonna work." And he's like, "She's mine." Possessive language, very important. Uh,
Very not feminist of him. Yeah.
so in the meantime, when like they're having that conversation, Jen decides to like fuck out of this whole situation. She runs away on her own.
God.
Whether it has anything to do with Lo is like really unclear, but she's like, but something about this whole situation like triggered something in her, and now she's also run away. So Lee Moonbai and Shu Dian tell Lo to like go to the mountains, like we'll meet up with you later, right? And then now they're going and hunting for Jen.
That whole scene where he crashes the wedding is so strange because it's like this big parade and it's a huge parade, right? Like many people, many people in this wedding procession. And he just like dive bombs into the middle of the crowd and everybody like scatters and stuff, and it's like you could have just let him fall on his face and then like step over him. Like there's no reason that this one man should have caused so much chaos in the like in this parade. But and he's also screaming like he's like screaming Jen's name and being like super hysterical and stuff, and it's just like this is one guy, guys. Like just you could ignore him. Like it's fine. Uh
I do think the fact that you find it so like awkward is like actually a strength of the movie, because we talked about it earlier when we were talking about Always Be My Maybe, about like movies and the like big romantic gestures, right? And how it's
yeah.
like a staple in these type of romance movies. And like I am of the genuine opinion that like in another movie it would have ended with Jen running away with him,
Mhm.
right? But I think the movie making it like really awkward and like making Jen run away but not particularly to run away with him and making
Yeah.
you feel uncomfortable about this is like kind of um peeling back some layers about like this archetype of the grand gesture in general,
Yeah.
right? And how uncomfortable it really would be.
Yeah, I know. I like that interpretation a lot. And we can obviously get a little bit more into the brass tacks of like that and romance in movies and stuff like this as a whole. Like at the same time that this film feels radically feminist, there's also a lot of stuff in it where I'm just like, okay, that was a choice. And like this is one of the things that they struck like a really good balance between those two things on, where it's like, you know, there's this like guy and he's being super hysterical about this girl that he likes, and it's like very cliche, but then the next scene is her like dressing up as a guy and then like roaming the mountains by herself and beating
Yeah.
up a bunch of people. And so it's like, all right, I can get behind this. It's a little chaotic, but like good for you. Which, yes, that's the next scene after Shulien and Li Mubai sort of like get Lo out of there. Is that Jen has stolen Green Destiny and she starts
Again.
to dress like a boy and becomes a wandering warrior boy woman who like beats up guys at bars and stuff. Which, like, I'm so glad that that's what she chose to do with her legendary 400-year-old sword. Is like the first thing that she does is like go into a restaurant. At least that's like the first big thing she does is she goes into a restaurant and like beats up everybody in this restaurant. And I'm like, you're just picking bar fights now. It's great. Yeah,
It's also like just it's probably not my favorite fight scene, but it's probably the fight scene where I had the most visceral fun
yeah.
because it's just so like satisfying just watching her just like destroy everyone and the restaurant while you're at it. And like the
Yeah.
choreography's great, the framing like for a fight that takes place in like a really large complex area, it's framed very easily to follow.
Yeah.
Right? You're going through the whole restaurant and you're keeping up with all of it. The choreography's great, and like honestly, everyone looks like they're having a lot of fun with this. Like I
Yeah.
know they're actors, so like they're acting like they're not just like getting totally beat up, but like you can tell that like the actors seem to like genuinely have like fun with this because it's just a
Yeah.
fun scene.
Yeah.
I also think it's like really important to like know in the scene it's, like when she's like ordering her food at the restaurant, she puts in like a really complicated like rich person order, right? Just kind of like hinting at that this is it's not that she's not cut out for this life, but that she's obviously not very ready for this life.
Yeah. She's out of
Right.
her element for sure.
Yeah. She
Yeah.
still thinks it's like the stories of like Lee Moonbai, right? And
Yeah.
Shu Lien, and she's still like has this idea of like it's gonna be this like fantastical way.
Yeah.
And then she gets here and it's like very different. Despite that though, she's still able to handle herself because she's very proficient in Wudang, and she also has like an ancient powerful sword.
She has a
that helps too.
400-year-old sword that can cut through literally anything. And we're going to visit this again later, but like I think part of the reason that Jen is so OP throughout the movie is because she has Green Destiny. There are many times throughout the movie, up until this point and after, where Jen is in fights where she is severely unmatched, particularly with Shulien. Like, Shulien is a better fighter than Jen, but the only times that they've like matched up together, Jen has the sword, and it puts her on a different level because that weapon is on a different level. We're about to get into that though, this sort of like epic fight between Jen and Shulien, which is sort of like the
Yeah.
climax of the film, really.
Mhm.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about how that happens.
So Jen shows up at like Shu Lien's place, right, and is like I need like help
Yeah.
because things aren't going too well for her. She obviously was not very prepared for this, and this is a really interesting and telling scene where Shu Lien is like, okay, we got like low in the mountains. You need to just go back home and like talk to your parents about this,
Yeah.
and like go home and like put all this away. This is not a good idea, and it makes Jen really upset because like Jen sees Shu Lien as like a sister. Like she literally calls her like sister, right? And consistently throughout the film, Shulian is not very helpful towards what Jen wants to do, right? And I think this is like really like the breaking point of it, where Jen is just fed up with Shulian telling her to go back to her parents, and they get into a fight. A very
Yeah.
fun fight, a very good fight, probably the best fight in the movie in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree.
Where, yeah, where Jen they like end up in like an arena with a bunch of weapons everywhere.
Yeah.
uh, I forget how they get there, and I don't care because it's a great idea. And Jen starts attacking Julien, and Julien like picks up a sword, and they start fighting. And throughout the whole fight, Jen is like, cutting through all of Julien's weapons because she has like the legendary sword, and then Julien will pick up another one and then come back and then continue to fight until the fight finally ends with Julien besting Jen, and she has her like at sword point or whatever weapon point, and decides to like spare her life, and instead, uh, Jen like swings her sword and like cuts Julien, and then like that's how the fight ends between those two. Do you
Yeah.
have any thoughts about that before we move on to the next
I
scene?
fucking love that fight scene. It's sort of like we started off this movie between these two women fighting, and they didn't know each other as well. And now it feels like these are two women who know each other. I mean, I wouldn't say intimately, but they know each other a lot better than they did at the beginning of the movie. And like that fight scene you can sort of see the conflict within both of them. You see how Julien is dealing with fighting with a younger woman, someone that she probably sees a lot of herself in, someone who is like fighting to be on equal standing as like a male warrior, right? And so like fighting her, there's a lot of conflict, and you can also kind of see that she's like pretty impressed by how far Jen has like come in her limited time of like training. And with Jen, it's like Shillian is like one of her idols. You know, she looks up to her. She calls her sister. She wants to be close and affectionate with her. And Shillian never gives her the answers to her life that she wants to hear. You know, she
Mm-hmm.
wants Shillian to tell her to like be a rebel and do the, you know, bad, like crazy thing. And Shillian keeps sort of advocating for like a more domestic, peaceful life for her, while downplaying the rebellious aspect of the good parts of the rebellious aspect that Jen is so attracted to.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the way that they get into the arena, I'm pretty sure that that's like Shulian's business. Like, because she runs that like private security company thing. And so, like,
Like
I
I
think
said,
that's
it
it's
doesn't
like,
matter to me
yeah,
because
like,
they can fight in the middle of a volcano for that fight, and I'd still take
yeah. It
it.
is really cool that they sort of it's like I think it's also emblematic when Shulian wins because it's like Jen came onto her territory, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and she thought that she would win because she had this like fancy weapon and everything. But at the end of the day, like Shulian is a better fighter. She has more experience. You know, she's not fighting. She's not even fighting to like prove something really anymore. You know, Jen kind of has this like very
Chip on her shoulder,
yeah,
like
like she
yeah.
her fighting style is almost like it's just kind of teenage in a way, you know? It's like teenaged. Like when you look at Julianne fighting, she's very centered, she's graceful, but she's forceful and like she knows who she is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Jen fights like she has something to prove, so she's like very reckless and she can afford to be reckless because she has the green destiny, right? There's a lot of times where like she'll get out of like a clutch or she'll get out of like being backed into a corner because she just cuts through whatever weapon her opponent is wielding against her. And I'm like, I hate to break it to you, but like, if you did not have this sword, you would be fucked right now. You know?
She had the sword and she still lost.
Yeah, like, yeah, and at the end of the day, like, she loses against Julian even with a sword, right? So, yeah, I loved this scene. I know that I keep saying, like, we'll get into the, like, nitty gritty of it later, but it's really, really good. That scene seems
Yeah.
very good. It's impeccably choreographed as well. It's very good.
Also, like the choreography, I like love how like emotional it is.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about it earlier. I just wanted to like reiterate, like you can really feel like the things that those characters are feeling.
Yeah.
They don't even dialogue that much. It's
Yeah.
just in the choreography. It's
Yeah.
it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
so Unless we have anything to say. You have anything else to
No, but we're about to move into more awkward crap
say?
that yeah, okay. So what
Okay,
happens
so
next?
Julian got cut. She's out. She's out of the fight now. And then like Lee Moon-bai shows up, and they like kind of, and Jen runs off, and then he like chases after her, and then they end up in like the bamboo forest, and they have like this whole fight, but it's very different than the type of fight that we had between Jen and Shu Lien, because this fight is like this fight is weird. First of all, they're fighting on like bamboos, which on like a technical level is like a really interesting concept and a really interesting idea. And I actually think they do the best a lot with it in a really cool and interesting ways, just from like a choreography standpoint, right? They're
Yeah.
fighting on like the bamboos and they're swaying back and forth and like they're trying to bounce on the bamboo and like that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, but also like I think something really interesting to note is like how much like sensual or like sexual tension is like baked into this scene, because like you have a lot of these moments in which it's like framing like Jen's like close-ups on Jen's face, right? There's like one really memorable moment where like it just like close-ups on her face as the bamboo is like brushing by. It's like slow-mo, and like it's really trying to like highlight like a lot of her like femininity and like beauty and things like that, which is like a really interest it's something that's going to make you question a lot of things because it's in the middle of a fight scene.
Yup.
uh, and I don't want to say too much because I think it's like better to get onto later. But like I think it's just like a really important thing to note about the scene in the like it's kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah. When I was watching the movie, I was looking through your notes for the show, and I was sort of following along with what was happening in the movie with your notes. And like the very first point that you make about this is like very oddly sensual, and I got to agree. I think that especially because we've just moved out of the fight with Shulien, like the tension and the way that they have choreographed and filmed the next fight scene between Li Mubai versus Jen is like a very, very clear cut comparison. You know what I mean? Like they went with a completely different route with this fight scene,
Hmm.
and it's like more intense, but like not in the way that it should be expected. Like it's not. It's an intense fight. It's an intense scene, but it's not an intense fight scene, because we
Yeah.
just got out of an intense fight scene. You know, so yeah, it's fucking
Yeah, I
weird.
think that's a really good point. Like some of these decisions I wouldn't question as much if I didn't see the fight before it,
Yeah.
right? Because now you know that these aren't just like some subconscious like stylistic decision that like the choreographers or the directors making. This has to be a very like conscious thing, because right before it we saw them do like something completely different, right?
Yeah.
Like the juxtaposition I think matters here a lot.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So the
Um,
fight ends,
but then Li
and
Mubai wins.
yeah, kinda. I don't know. They barely even fight. And Lee Moonbai's like, I'm gonna like take you to the mountains and train you, and Jen's like, no. And I think like she like wagers with him, like they make a wager, and it's like if you can like take the sword from me in 3 moves, I'll go to the mountains with you. And then like he like does it in 1 move, and then she gets mad, and then like she gets mad, she reneges on her like wager, and then he like chucks the sword into over the
Yeah.
waterfall, and she just dives after it.
Yeah. And she ends up like kind of drowning, at which point she's rescued by Jade Fox.
Hmm.
Um, and then this next scene is it's, huh.
There's a lot's gonna happen in a very short amount of time.
Yes. So Jen gets rescued by the Jade Fox, and then she wakes up in a cave again. The amount of times that Jen wakes up in a strange cave, like if I had a nickel for every time it happened, I would have 2 nickels, which is not a lot of money, but it's weird that it happened twice. Like it's literally that, you know what I mean? Like, so she wakes up in a cave, and she's like kind of woozy, and she kind of stumbles out of the cave, and then Li Mubai comes in with Shulien.
I
Well,
think
actually, no.
first it's like
It's just
important.
first. Yeah, it's first just him, and then like Jen like
I
takes
also want to,
off. Like
but before we get there, I also want to talk about like how like at this point Jade Fox is talking to Jen, and it's revealed that like, um, the whole time Jade Fox had been like trying to teach Jen Wudang, But instead, what was really happening was Jen, because she's literate and Jade Fox isn't, was actually reading the manual the whole time,
Oh.
right? And for that reason, she actually became like by the age of 10, she was actually way more proficient like Wudang practitioner than Jade Fox was.
Was that before
And Jade Fox
this?
like feels really betrayed because of that. Uh,
Oh, I thought it was after this.
was it after this? I
That's my
think it was
bad.
like, was it after this?
I promise I watched this. I promise I watched this movie. I
I
remember
think
that happening. I thought it was I thought it was after this cave
I
scene.
think it happened before this because then we find out that she got poisoned after, and I think it makes more sense for it to be in that order, but I could be wrong.
Well, either way, it's important context kind of for like what comes next. So yeah, like just like you said, like Jen basically has surpassed Jade Fox, and Jade Fox feels like very betrayed about it. And the reason she's kind of like stumbly and woozy is because Jade Fox has poisoned her. So when Li Mubai comes into the cave, Jen is like out of it, kinda, and then she like takes off her clothes a little bit, and she's like, "Is it me or the sword that you came for?" And it's
And like the cave is like dripping water, so she's like
yeah, like she's
drenched,
soaking wet, and it's
soaking
it's
wet.
a whole artistic choice. Um, and then the Jade Fox has like set up this like ambush thing where there's like a bunch of like poison darts that like shoot out from different points of the cave, and Li Bubai gets poisoned. And Jade Fox is also killed at that point because I can't remember exactly in what order that happens, but like the darts come out, Jade Fox also comes out. Liu Bai deflects a bunch of the darts, but he like misses one, and then she dies because he kills her. And then yeah. So Jade Fox is dead and Li Mubai is dying. Um
Shulian shows up at some point in the
yeah.
movie.
Julian comes in, she like starts to, get really upset about the fact that like Jade Fox is dead because now they don't know what poison it is, and so they can't find the antidote. But Jen is like, oh, I know the antidote because I know what poison she uses, and then she runs out of the cave to go try and find the antidote. And then Li Mubai dies, looking into Michelle Yeoh's beautiful eyes, and he says in his last breath, "I love you," and then he dies. And then
For everyone in the audience here, it was a lot more graceful than how Yeji has recapped it. Okay,
no, that's exactly
during
how
this
it
whole
happened.
time, Jen is also like racing to the compound to try to make the antidote. It's very dramatic. She's like running
No,
back.
it's not. He even switches from speaking Chinese to English, and he just goes, "I love you," and then he dies. And then the movie ends. No, I'm just kidding. Uh,
Yes.
and so yeah, and then Jen comes back, but it's too late. And then this scene, I'm gonna be honest with you, like I can't really remember all that well, but I like somewhat remember Julianne like telling Jen like,
Be true to
"Do
yourself.
you, yeah, like be true to yourself," like, and then I can't remember what happens after that. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so Shu Lien is grieving, holding her dead, not even lover, like I don't know, her dead situationship dude, uh, in her arms. uh,
Dead
and
situationship, dude. Oh,
is that not
I'm
accurate? I feel like
totally using that to. I'm
those are the words that
totally
I think
using
sum
that.
up this relationship the
That
best.
is exactly what it is. Yes.
Um, so and she's like all broken about it, and then she, in like a break of character, tells Jen, "Be true to yourself." Doesn't even like tell her like go home or go to the mountains. Like she just not give a fuck at this point. Right?
Yeah.
Her last words in to Jen in the movie are "Be true to yourself." And then we cut to Jen in the mountains, with Lo, right? And they have like a conversation, and then like it seems like they're gonna be together or something like that,
Yeah.
right? But like she also like gives him the comb, which is like a symbolic gesture because like that's kind of like Lo promised to return that comb to her the next time they saw each other, right? So like
Yeah.
it's symbolic. Or maybe it was the other way around. Something with a comb is symbolic, I swear. Uh, okay.
I could tell you the
Uh,
symbolism of the comb.
it's one of those things where it's symbolic, but it's also like not so like complicated or deep that I'm like it's not the most interesting thing I want to talk about. So I'm not
Yeah,
committing it to memory.
that is true. But it's like I again like with the theme of sort of like Jen's like innocence or like coming of age thing, like basically when Jen like when Lo steals her comb and she goes after him, um, he like ends up giving it back to her once they've like fallen in love. And then right before she decides to go back home, she gives him back the comb and says like come back for me and like give it back to me um when you come find me again, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that's like the symbolism of it. And also
Mm-hmm.
like when she gave it back to him before like the marriage procession and everything, it's basically like I think it's like either like her innocent love or like love in general, like a symbolism of their relationship, you know, all
Yeah.
that good stuff.
Symbolism. It's important for writing. That's why.
Symbolism.
I genuinely do find that piece of symbolism like genuinely very beautiful. I just have not committed it to memory.
It doesn't matter enough to me.
Yeah. So she then goes to like the side of like the mountain and she's like talking to Lo and she's like make a wish and he's I wish to be in like the desert with you and then she jumps off. That's the end of the movie. It should be noted though she doesn't just like jump and just like drop. She starts like gliding through the mist and she seems very happy about it. They like close up to her face and she seems like quite at peace about it.
Yep.
And that's kind of where the movie ends. It's like very ambiguous. Earlier we talked about how like he was talking about like the mythological story about how like the kid jumping off the cliff to like fulfill the wishes, right? And him having faith that he wouldn't that it would come true, right? And then we kind of full circle here. She tells her to make a wish, and then she jumps off, and that's where we end here.
Yep.
All right. So before we get into like thematic analysis, like overall things you want to say about this whole shebang.
This movie is complicated for me. I mean, it's very clear that it's old, right? So there's a lot of things
Is it
that
old? You know how
well,
old it is?
it's like
It's as old as I
23
am.
years. Oh fuck yeah, you're old, dude.
Ow!
Yeah, this coming from
I was hoping you would renege that and say it's not that old, but damn, I got burned.
Yeah, you know me on. I'm not gonna give you a break. I can't give you a break. No, so I mean, this came out like, is it
2000.
is it? Oh, it's 2000. Oh, I thought it was
Mm-hmm.
99. So yeah, 2000. So this was yeah. So 23 years ago. It gives off the vibes of an older movie, you know, with all the practical effects and everything. You kind of, a modern audience is primed to understand that there's going to be stuff in this that's outdated, um, which I think I chalked a lot of stuff that happened in this movie up to like, oh, it's like old, which we can get into that a little bit more because I do think that there is a difference between having something in it where you're like, oh, that's just like, you know, we can brush it off as it just being like an older movie versus like a choice that was made and should be scrutinized because it was a choice and not just a product of the time in which it was like created. I think that the way that they play a lot with like the gender roles and the warrior heroism aspect between like the men and the women in this is really really cool. We have like two quote unquote heroes in this and every character is kind of a hero in their own right as well. Lo is like the hero who saved Jen from her childhood essentially, like he showed her what it was like to sort of live her own life, live freely, you know, without the constraints of like her class and her social upbringing. So he was her hero in that way, in that specific time. Shulian is Jen's hero as well, in the way that like that is the woman that Jen has been trying to become ever since she did come back from the desert. And ever since she was 10 years old when she started training in Wudang martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
And then Li Mubai is just a very quintessential basic hero. Like he was like the legendary swordsman who was like trying to achieve enlightenment, and so we sort of have like this very basic hero archetype as well. And then Jen is the hero because this is her story. It might be a little bit more complex than that, which it definitely is more complex than that. But like she is the main character of the story, and so in her own way, she's just a hero in her own right. Just in that respect, but also she goes through a whole like adventure with this, and we get to see her evolving, becoming her own person, what lessons she learns, what lessons she doesn't, um, and all that really good stuff. And so, yeah, I think that the way that they play with that, like, again, like, this is a Wuxia movie, so it's literally about like martial arts heroism. That's the genre as a whole, right? And so the way that they made their main character a woman and played with like a woman being a hero and the men being weird and very like imperfect and borderline hysterical was really really cool. Um just specifically with Lowe as well. I think that he kind of embodies this weird like tragic female character cliche of when he like crashes his lover's wedding because like I can't live without you, and like like we maybe as a modern audience don't necessarily think of that as like quintessentially female because we have a lot better role models, but like if we look back, that's like the tragic female archetype, right? Is like the woman
Hmm.
who can't have her lover because he's been like pledged to somebody else, even though they were lovers at one time, kind of thing. And so I thought it
The
was really
classic.
interesting that they like made that character into a guy and still included like that sort of hysterical aspect of it that everybody sort of identifies as like the female aspect of it. Like the like him freaking out and being like super crazy about it is like yeah, like female hysteria kind of thing. I thought that was really cool. So, yeah. So, what did you think specifically about the gender roles and stuff in this movie? Because I think that's what you
uh,
like kind of wanted to talk about mainly with this. And it's like something that stood out to you the most.
so just like generally, I think the movie was just really fun. When it was fun, it was like really fun. You
Yeah.
know, like when we had like the fun martial arts scenes, it was really fun. I genuinely walked into this movie thinking it would just be like a turn your brain off type thing. Like this week was actually supposed to be like a light week for us because we wanted to work on bigger projects, right?
Yeah. On
And then
what the fuck?
yeah, and
Yeah.
then I watched the movie and I was like, shoot, I have to do like like a deep dive now because like I think there's way more to it. So yeah, I genuinely thought this would just be a fun thing, with fun fights, and like the fights were genuinely very good, very well choreographed. We talked about it a lot, but where I think like the really interesting part of the movie comes down to is like what it says about like romance and like the genre and like a lot of tropes and stuff like that, which I'll get into a bit later. I also think it's like really interesting. It's not really in my notes, and like I think I kind of just came to this as you were talking, but like it's really interesting that like for a movie in which we have very obvious tropes of who should be the hero, who should be the protagonist, right? Like Lee Moon Bai or Lo, very obviously should be like the protagonist, and like in any other movie it would be the case, right? But in this movie, instead, we actually have the movie start framed on Shu Lian's perspective, right? And then it shifts into Jen, and we actually really never have like the movie framed from like any of the male characters' perspectives.
Yeah.
It's only through like the woman that we really experience this movie through,
Yeah.
right? Which is like I think a very purposeful like we were wondering earlier why Lee Moonbai was not at the beginning of the movie, and I think there might be an argument to be had that like genuinely as the type of character he is, he would have probably stolen that protagonist role,
Yeah.
right? And removing him from the beginning of the story and letting it be focused on Shu Lian was actually a really smart decision in that way,
Yeah.
for reasons that I'll get into later.
Yeah. I agree with everything that you just said. I think that that is definitely like an active choice that they made. I think that it's very hard to make a movie like that and not take that into consideration. Like that's not something that happens on accident.
Hmm.
Framing it from the female perspective was very it was very purposeful and it was a choice, and there were things in it where I was like, huh, interesting. But at the end of the day, like, this movie is and was at the time revolutionary in the way that it tackled certain like thematic elements and the the dialogue between the characters and the character interactions and everything. And so yeah, in many ways this is like radically feminist. And in many ways it's not. So um
Have you read my notes on the analysis part? Or
I I have a little bit, but I kind of wanted to like hear it from you because I also couldn't stop laughing at like some of your other notes because you meme a lot in your notes and it's really funny.
I do.
Ro-
You do
obvi-
too. It's actually very entertaining to just read.
Obvious romantic tension is obvious. So why didn't you go the first time? It's so funny. I read it in your voice and it makes me happy. So no,
All
yeah.
right.
Please get into your thematic analysis. I'd love to hear more.
All right. So, I think very obviously, right, surface level, the themes of like this film, like gender roles and freedom, right? But I think the most interesting way to look at it is first of all to like understand that. Okay, first, the emotional core of the movie is Jen, right? She's not the protagonist for the whole movie, but I think she's the emotional core of the movie.
Yeah.
And you probably wouldn't argue with that. Second thing I think we have to understand about the movie is that everyone is wrong. Like every character, like normally in like media, like you're supposed to have a character. There's typically a character in which you can ascribe like moral like goodness to, and like that's the character you should be like listening to,
Yep.
right? Or like their actions are coded as morally correct. Right, think like Superman or whatever, right? Like no matter what Superman does, even if it's bad, it's like implied to be morally correct just because that's the way Superman is encoded.
Yep.
I think that's like not the way to approach this movie at all. I think everyone should be scrutinized and everyone is wrong.
Yeah.
And I think we have five main characters to follow, right? So we have Jen, who's like the emotional core, right? And like I think we can learn a lot about the ways that other characters interact with her, right? And we have four characters that interact with her in interesting ways. We have, and I think it's really important to like look at it as like a matrix, right? Where like one like one like dimension of the matrix is like freedom, right? And then the other freedom versus conformity, and then the other one is gender, male versus like female,
Yeah.
right? Gender roles, right? So we have Shu Lian, who is this like representation of female conformity, right?
Yes.
She's very much like all her dialogue is very much about like conformity and like how that affects women. And then we have Lee Moonbai, which is about male conformity and like those ways that it is enacted on like the other people around them. We have Lo, who's like male like freedom. He literally lives in the desert.
In a cave.
And then we have Jade Fox, which is like female like freedom, but there's asterisks and we can get to that.
Yeah.
So I just kind of want to like analyze each of those characters and their interactions with Jen based on that, and I think that's kind of like where the movie's that is like how I interpret the movie, right?
Okay.
So first we have Shu Lian with like female conformity. So I think like the really important thing to note here is that like she like throughout this movie she gets like nothing she wants, right?
Yep.
So, like the very obvious thing, her and like Lee Moonbai don't end up together because he's too fucking dead
On.
to be married.
That was not what I thought you were gonna say. I was like emotionally unavailable or too caught up in his own. Nope, fucking dead. He's just dead.
He's just dead.
He's just dead.
And like that's like a really big point of like being sad for her, right? She's really like that's kind of implied what like she wanted the whole time. But I also think it's really important to like look at like the rest of her life, right? Like when she like talks to other people, notice how like they always talk about Lee Moonbai, right? She is a very notable warrior in her own right, possibly even more talented than he is. She has many more feats than he does throughout the movie. But when she's talking to like Sorte, she's talking to Jen, they're always mentioning Lee Moonbai before they really mention like Shu Lian, right?
Yeah.
Her legend, she does not get to enjoy the same legendary status that Lee Moonbai gets to enjoy, right?
I totally agree with you. I think that as badass as Shulian is, there's just many points where it's very clear that she is fundamentally afraid. She's
Yeah.
afraid of breaking the mold. As talented and as badass as she is, she encourages Jen and even herself to take on, male burdens that she doesn't necessarily have to. Which, we've talked about the taking the sword to Surte thing, and we can talk about whether or not that was a stylistic, or we can talk about whether or not that was a Watsonian or Doyleist thing. But at the end of the day, like, she's running an errand for him.
Yes.
Right? Like, no
Yeah.
matter if it was for the plot or because we needed him to be in this place and her to be in this place at the same, like, she's running an errand for him. Right? And so she has all of these things happening around her and at her as well, but all of them are kind of framed also as like Li Mubai's struggles instead of her own.
Hmm.
Like when he's like, I want to take Jen on as a student, and she's like, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, I know that you're intrigued by her, but I just don't think that that's a good idea. And then she ends up having to like fight with Jen over and over and over again because like he is so like intent on finding her and like getting in contact with her basically, and it just never ends up well for Julianne.
She really does not get to make her own decisions in how like the plot moves
Yeah.
in this movie. It's
Yeah.
very much like towards Lee Moonbai's desire. It's probably a weird way to say it, but probably actually the most accurate way to say it.
Yeah. Like
To train.
as much as she is, as much as her perspective, like her own POV is impactful throughout the movie, she doesn't actually make any choices that matter,
Hmm.
which is hard to see because she is a POV character at the end
Yeah,
of the day, right? Like, we spend a lot of the movie looking at what she's looking at and following her, right? And so when you realize kind of at the end of it, like, what does she have to show for all of this stuff?
exactly.
Like, why did you even do any of this? Like, what was the point of all of it? And you can't really answer that when it comes to her character because she literally does not make any of her own decisions, and it fucking sucks. Uh,
100%. I think like her character really shows that like conforming, female conformity got gets you nothing. It got her
yeah,
nothing. She left the end of the movie with literally nothing that she wanted.
yeah,
Right? She doesn't have legend, she doesn't have status, she doesn't have like her situationship dude. Like she literally walks up with nothing, and it really shows like in a patriarchal society like you can conform all you want, right? Or in any sort of axis that we can like look at, like whether it be like patriarchy or whether it be like race or like socioeconomic, right? Like
yeah,
no matter how much you conform and give in to like the system, you're gonna walk out oppressed with
yeah.
nothing,
And that's
right?
not your choice. Yeah,
And I think like that breaks her at the end. I think that's why like the at the end when she says be true to yourself, it's like so like heartbreaking, right? Because like it's her at the end and she's looking back at everything in her life, right? And then it hits her at that moment, right? Now that she's lost everything, it hits her, right? That like none of this worked out for me.
yeah,
And that's why at the end she like switches she 180s and it's like, no, just be true to yourself. Like
yeah.
fuck
Just
this
do
shit.
whatever you want. You don't have to conform. Which we can talk a little bit more about this when we get to Jen as well, but like this sort of always her turning Jen back to like go back, like do this, don't break the mold. Just like do this, keep your head down, like don't be a warrior. It's fucking stressful, right?
Hmm.
I think in a way it is female conformity, but it's also her own way of like trying to protect Jen from being disappointed.
Hmm.
Which I might be reading a lot more into that, but like she is so like perhaps she was telling Jen that like the warrior life isn't all that glamorous or anything, like you're not going to get like the recognition or whatever that you think you're going to get, because like she knows that because it's true,
She
and
lives
she's
it.
trying to like turn this naive youngster away from what she thinks she wants, because she's like, I know that you think that this is how this is going to work out, but unfortunately that's not true. So you need to keep your head down and do your work, and that's how you live like a peaceful, prosperous life, you know.
Hmm.
There might even be like an element of envy in that as well, like being able to live a peaceful life with a spoon, like a silver spoon in your mouth, and not having to worry about anything. Like, I'm sure Shulian in some ways like preferred maybe that life because she was a warrior and she still is a warrior. um and so having to like fight every day is probably something that she is tired of at this point, and like she would probably love to be married off to an aristocratic family. I am like totally spitballing here, but it just seems like when Shulian does that, it's not necessarily in this like malicious manner. It really does seem like she has the best intentions when she is like sort of turning Jen back to conformity. Um, and it's very like closely tied to her own experience with the world, you know? It's not just that
Hmm.
she's not saying like don't be a rebel because it's like a bad thing to do, you know. She's saying don't be a rebel because it doesn't work out for you and it's stressful and it's not what you think it is, and I've had to do it, so I'm trying to warn you not to do it, kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like much deeper than just a simple it's not everything it's cut out to be kind of thing, you know.
Yeah,
I
I
wish they
understand that.
had spent a little bit more time on that. But again, like I said before, we don't get a lot of exposition or even like any other expository elements. Even the flashback that we get of Lo and Jen is not really expository in any way. It's like establishing who Lo is, establishing who Jen is and her history, and like bringing us, the audience, in as her being the main character. That flashback was not exposition. It was very important context, right, that we like needed and required to get into Jen's like head space. Exposition is not necessary, and it's not necessarily context either, but sometimes it can be important to understand like where the writer is trying to steer the plot and what kind of message they're trying to get across. And because this movie does not have any exposition, right, there's a
Hmm.
lot of stuff that's left up to audience interpretation. And so for Julianne, I think that's one of the things that I noticed about that was whenever she was trying to like dissuade Jen, there just seemed to be a lot more complicated reasons why she was doing that, and not all of them had to do with like don't do this, it's like bad, like, you know what I mean, like it was much more complicated than that.
It
um
seemed to come from a very like deep place in her heart, and I think
yeah,
says something about like how much this whole thing has like beaten her down. She feels very weary about like everything,
yeah,
right? In these
yeah,
conversations, right?
yeah,
It feels very much like someone who's really been through it and speaking from a lot of pain.
yeah.
I think.
And that's why I think the be true to yourself at the end of everything is so much more impactful, because it's her letting go of all of that trauma and all of those hard things and being like, yeah, like if you want to live a hard life, that's your basket of eggs, you know, drop it if you want to. That's not on me, that's on you. And that's okay. You know, be
Hmm.
free to do whatever you want, because life hurts and there's nothing you can do to change that, kind of thing, you know? Like, I kind of think that she does spend a lot of the movie like pining after Lee Mubai. And so when she loses him, she's like, why did I even put in all of that work and
Yeah.
effort into like trying to get him to fall in love with me when this is what the outcome was going to be, you know? So
Hmm.
no matter how much you conform, no matter how much you push back, it's sort of life just happens the way that it happens. And so I think that's the lesson that is to be learned from her character for sure.
I think life just happens the way it happens, but specifically for women, because segue into Lee Moonbai's character.
Yeah.
So we went from female conformity, and then now we have Lee Moonbai, who's like all about like male conformity. And I think like notably for his character, he doesn't lose anything, right? Like,
Except his
sh-
life.
yes, but like, but the way it's framed is like he's not even that bothered about it. He like gives it up to say his like last words, right?
Yeah.
Right, like emotionally, he does not go through the same pain that Shu Lien goes through, right? Because like throughout this whole movie, like he's the legendary hero. He has like the money and the fame and like the legend, right? He's allowed to be a master in his craft, right?
Yes.
Even though it's kind of possibly hinted that Shu Lian is actually better than him. Um, but he is the one who gets all the accolades and stuff like that. And like his biggest failure, right, is like not being able to reach enlightenment, right? Which is like a problem for him, yes, but it's also like the most like it's the most like uh I don't want to. It sounds bad that I say this, but it's like the most privileged problem that any of these characters have,
Yeah.
right? Like I get it. It's like spiritually like not great for him, and like he has some sort of emotional like turmoil because of it. But he really actually doesn't. He
Yeah.
doesn't display that throughout the movie. He's actually not that hurt about it, right? And compared to how grounded everyone else's problems are in the movie, right? It's kind of like juxtaposed and like odd, right? And it's a very personal problem, right? Everyone else's problems about them and how like their environment affects them, but his problems like as being a man who like conforms, he just wins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what this like movie's like trying to point out, right? It's like juxtaposed against Shu Lian's character who loses everything for conforming. Like yeah, he loses his life, but like he also does it in a way on his terms, right?
I mean, yeah, he dies, but like, was it even like a bad thing? Like,
He doesn't seem that torn up about it genuinely, right? Like he gets to avenge his master and then he dies telling like the woman he loves, like
yeah,
because he gets this whole like dramatic speech and he gets to like leave
yeah,
his last words the exact way he wants it to be,
yeah.
right? Like you could not write a better ending for like I mean like I guess he could live, but like it's genuinely not. I don't feel that bad about him dying. That's what I'm saying. I feel much more bad for Shu Lin for losing him than actually for him for dying. You get what
Oh
I'm
my
saying?
god. I'm this is so funny to me because you're totally right, right? Like he died a warrior's death in the arms of the woman he loves. Like he
Mm-hmm.
didn't fucking lose anything. Like I mean, yeah, like he died. I just think it's so funny that like we're unironically saying that because it's true. Like you know, a lot of times when people are like, yeah, like he died, but you know, he got like this and this, we're like being facetious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but genuinely, like Li Mubai does not lose anything in life, and he doesn't lose anything in death,
Yeah.
other than his life, you know. Um, I also just think like he has such a, and you were talking about this too, right? But like he has such a naive view of the world, which
Mm-hmm.
is very well juxtaposed to the way that like Jen's naivety affects the way that she views the world. But like his naivety is because he has never had to like struggle for anything. Um, like
Mm-hmm.
if his biggest failure in life is not being able to reach Buddhist enlightenment, like he's not doing all that bad, you know. Like he's living pretty, you know. Everybody knows his name. Everybody talks about him. When Jen is like doing her little wandering warrior thing, she runs into guys that like see her swordsmanship and they're like, "Are you by any chance related to the legendary swordsman Li Mubai?" And it's like, even now that he's dead, his legend is probably going to get even bigger, you know?
Mm-hmm.
He views the world in a way that someone who has never really had to like struggle for anything views the world. And it's reflected in the way that he talks to people and the way that he tries to solve problems. And like, it's so tragic to watch like Shulian try to solve a problem and it not going her way versus like Li Mubai trying to solve a problem and it going his way just by virtue of the fact that like he just ends up getting everything that he wants. You know, like that
Or
sucks.
someone else has to clean it up for him.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's just
um,
yeah, it's frustrating and it's not great, but it's also like very important to be able to see that, like actively see that his character is not.
It's the product of the patriarchy.
Yeah, like his character is not perfect, and as much as he is like depicted to be the hero character, he has a lot of stuff that's not good about him, and to be conscious of that, like I'm sure there are also people out there who were like Lee Mubai is like so cool and he did nothing wrong and blah blah blah. Like being able to be conscious of what is wrong about Lee Mubai is also like being able to understand how male conformity harms even the people who are benefiting from it.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
his character choices are a choice.
yeah. I think it's in my opinion, I think it's on purpose to show like I said, the juxtaposition between like him and like Shu Lian, right? Showing how like the patriarchy like essentially like took everything away from Shu Lian, but like makes him win in every single way, right? But notably, it doesn't make him a particularly great guy, right? Because like the second thing about him that I think is like really notable is like he's kind of like really sexist,
Yeah.
right? And like we get a lot of little hints about this. Like first of all, like we know his master is like demonstrably like sexist. Like you cannot argue against that, right? Uh, and you have to like, and it's like he's probably gonna like pick up a little bit of that. And but I think it's like really interesting in like the dialogue choices how it manifests, right? After the first time he fights Jen, right? He's having that conversation with Shu Lian, right? And Shu Lian is bringing up these like genuine problems, right? You talked about this earlier. She's bringing up these genuine problems, and he's just brushing them off because like he like I was reading this like book. I forgot who wrote it. Dang it. But like the argument essentially was that like people who are like on a lower class always have to look up, right? Because they always need to be hyper aware about like how people in higher positions than them can hurt them, right? So they end up developing an ability to like empathize upwards, thus for like understand how other people are operating. But people who are like in power generally don't want to look down because like you look down, you're gonna see a lot of like suffering.
Yeah.
So they don't. So they end up not being able to empathize with like people who are being disadvantaged by the system, right? And in that way cannot notice when things are not going to work, right? That's why he's able to just say they'll make an exception, even though Shu Lian is like obviously not like
Yeah.
we have no evidence to believe that,
Yeah.
right? And she can understand that because she's seen it, but he literally isn't like so privileged by the system that he doesn't see it.
I also just think it's so funny too when he's just like, I'll make it work because like you know that he could. And it's like,
Possibly.
yeah, you probably could make it work because you're a dude. Like that's the only reason why. Also because you have a reputation in the industry already, you know? Like she's saying it can't work because she's aware of the rules. And he's saying it will work not because he's not aware of the rules, but because he's very aware in a very specific kind of ignorant aware way that he can break the rules just by virtue of being who he is. It's
Mm-hmm.
fucked up. He's a fucking weirdo. And I'm so
He
glad
is
that
weird.
he like there were just some
Is
times where cuz everybody's wearing like traditional costumes and everything and like all the men have
mm-hmm.
their hair in like a traditional way. And sometimes I was like, I'm really glad that I can't take you seriously with that haircut. Like I was just able to just kind of like brush off certain things cuz I'm like, yeah, you're wearing that haircut, guy. Um
I do believe there's historical context behind that, but
I mean, there definitely is. It's like it's when like people did not want their hair in their face and like sometimes men also wore helmets and things into battle and so they like shaved the front of their head because that just meant that there was no hair to go into your eyes and stuff.
I
But
think it might.
it does look kind of goofy. And
I do
so,
think
yeah.
it might be have been forced upon them by like the rulers of the time, though.
I
Like I
did
don't.
I did read something about that as well, which I thought was really cool, but yes, still looks goofy.
Yeah. um. Okay. So going back. Where were we? Oh, and then I think the last thing about his character regarding like patriarchy and like and like sexuality is like how like he is viewing like his relationships with like women on like that type of like axis, right? Like, of course, his relationship with like Julian, but also I think it's very notable um, how his interactions with Jen are like depicted as like oddly sexual, throughout the film, right? And like Julian picks up on it in her dialogue. She's like, "I knew you would be interested in her," right? The bamboo fight scene is like really oddly sexualized. The scene in the cave where she like bares her chest and like asks like, "Is it me or the sword that you want?" Right? Like I think
Yep.
all of these are like hinting towards like are like depicting the way in which like uh like the patriarchy like influences men to be always thinking about like women and like in like on like sexual axes,
Yep.
right? He's always it's always we are not in his head, but I think in the framing of the movie we know it's in his head. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so
As
yes,
weird as that is to kind of like go into, it's yeah.
yeah. For that reason, I will argue that like Lee Moon-bai like has a lot of really interesting odd choices made throughout the movie, but I think they're all in service of like making us uncomfortable on purpose to think about these problems,
Yeah.
right? Because of how jarringly juxtaposed they are to like other things in the movie. Like you don't put a scene like that like the bamboo scene feels very out of place in the context of the movie, and I think it's jarring and out of place on purpose to make people reflect on it.
Yeah.
Or that is my very generous reading
Yeah.
of the movie and why all that stuff is there.
Yeah. I
Uh,
appreciate that interpretation. It's definitely not the first thing that was like going through my head when I was watching it. All I could feel was like the discomfort of watching it. Um but I think that discomfort for audiences is really important because it forces them to think. Like if you're uncomfortable with something, it forces you to wonder why you're uncomfortable about it. There are very few
exactly.
people who will like sit down, watch a piece of media, get uncomfortable by it, and not ask why they got uncomfortable. At the very least, they'll be like, "Oh, that made me feel weird," you know? And so being able to see all of these scenes that did make the both of us uncomfortable and being able to sort of sit down and dissect that and also refer it back to like gender roles and the patriarchy is actually really fascinating. And I think that it's because of also like the way that both of us have been primed to ingest certain types of media that we're able to be like, this is sexist, here's why. Or like, this is why this made me uncomfortable, and it's because it's like the patriarchy. I just think that's cool, and discomfort is like in general for our audience. Like, I want you guys to know that like being uncomfortable watching a piece of media is not always a bad thing. Like,
Unless it's been a girlfriend.
unless it's rent a girlfriend. Unless it's that, and then you can like burn it and then run away, and then also like bleach your fucking eyes. But let yourself get uncomfortable with certain things, and ask yourself why it made you uncomfortable, and what kind of framework that we're working with in the world and society as a whole that makes those kinds of things fit and not fit within your own framework of viewing the world. Was that deep and philosophical enough?
I think you nailed it. I
Okay,
think you nailed it. If there's any lessons
perfect.
you gotta learn, it's that one. Okay, so we got two more characters, and I think this is gonna be a lot shorter because like they don't show up as much.
Yeah, there's not as much to work
But
with here.
we have Jade Fox, right, who I think represents like the female freedom, and I like put an asterisk on it because like I think it's probably like the least consistent with this type of reading, right? Because she doesn't really choose to be free. It's very much forced upon her, right? But I think even if we think about her and like being female and free in the society, we can see how like blatantly sexist it is, right? Where like Shulian things like can look like they're fine because she like is generally well off,
Yeah,
right? The things are a little more subtle, but with like Jade Fox, who's definitely outside of the system now,
yeah,
uh, her life is like demonstrably worse
yeah,
on very many different levels, and I think that's why we spend the least time with her. It's because there's just not a lot to say that like should not already be obvious in 2000,
yeah,
right? It's like sexism is bad in these very obvious ways, and I think that's why we spend so much more time with the other characters. We get to see how sexism is bad in more subtle ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that when Jade Fox first came out and when she says that thing about like, oh well, like he would sleep with me, but he wouldn't teach me, was like, whoa, okay, like I can get behind this, like kill some bitches, right?
Yeah, she's like, that's
There's
why he needs to like die by like a woman's
yes,
hand or
like
something
that's
like
why
that.
he
It's very
deserved to die
poetic.
by a woman's hand, and I was like, okay, like you do that murdering, bro. I'll get behind this. Um, um, so I don't know if you've seen The Menu yet, but
I have not.
it's a really great film. You should watch it. Not Asian American in particular, but Anya Taylor-Joy is in that movie. And when she was doing her press tour for that movie, and when she was like going on, all her interviews and stuff, there's a scene in that movie, which I'm not going to spoil anything about it, but like there's a scene in that movie where she gets very angry, and that was actually something that she needed to like pull the director aside and talk to him about because when she's in the interview, she's like, I have this thing about like feminine rage. And a lot of times when men write feminine rage, they will write the woman sort of like seething, but she's sitting down and like a single tear rolls down her eye, like rolls down her face,
Hmm.
she's angry and she's being written to be angry, but like she's not showing her anger. And this is also like an overcorrection from like the hysterical female trope, that which I actually brought up earlier when I was talking about Low. But nowadays females can't be angry because it's like they need to be more demure, but also like bad females, like villain type females, are allowed to get angry in like the conventional way. They're allowed to like break shit and like kill people and like be loud and frustrated while they're doing it. And so what Anya Taylor-Joy was saying was like, I like this character would not be sitting still while this was happening. Like she would
Hmm.
throw a fit. So let me throw a fit, right? And I think that like Jade Fox is sort of like a really great personification of all of those things sort of like come to life in a very like nuanced and kind of specific way, because like the reason that the female character in Menu is freaking out is very different from the reason why Jade Fox is like raging against the patriarchy. But like I like the fact that Jade Fox is an angry character. I like that she like dies like resentful still. And I think that that is like where she needs to be. I think that's what her character like needs to represent, because
Hmm.
we have the two other female main characters representing two very different types of femininity. We needed another extreme. It's interesting because Jen is like, we find out kind of through the Jade Fox that Jen is actually the middle ground. She's the one who struggles and gets pulled back and forth between conformity and rebellion, conformity and like anger, right? Demureness and anger. Whereas like Jade Fox and Julien are actually the ones on like both sides of that particular spectrum. And so Jade Fox is exactly where she needs to be as a character for the plot, and just for like satisfactory reasons. I liked watching her fight. I think that she has a I think the choreographers did a great job in handling how different characters fought to fit in with their character types. You see that Jen, sometimes when she fights, especially in close quarters with people, she almost fights like she's like throwing a tantrum.
Hmm.
It's very like army. When she just uses her arms a lot and she's like throwing them everywhere. Like when she like tackles with Low as well. She's like beating him off like with her arms and like using like child fists, you know what I mean? Like she's not
Hmm.
punching him, she's like using the back of her fists to like pummel him. It's like it feels very childlike.
Hmm.
Whereas also like when she has the sword, she fights in a very reckless way because she doesn't need to be safe because she has that like weapon. And so her fighting style is very close to like her own personal struggles, right? Like she doesn't want to be a child anymore. So she wants to be like this rebellious person, but she also can't like break out of her rebellion fully because this is how she was raised, right? Like this is just the
Mhm.
conditions in which she exists. And you brought that up also in the restaurant scene where she's like ordering all of these like frivolous foods and stuff, right? Like she wants to be a warrior, but she's not like built for that, you know? Um Whereas Jade Fox, like her fight style is also all over the place, but it's like a controlled chaos. You know, her
Mhm.
costume is also really great for this because she wears like long black robes that sort of like whoosh everywhere when she fights, and it's very dynamic. And we can't really see where she's going because her movements are all sort of like covered up by her clothing, but like wherever she goes, everything else like moves with her, and it's very cool. And I don't know, I like her character a lot, even though she doesn't get a whole bunch of screen time, and even though she's like kind of an awful person and does a lot of murdering, I'm still here for it. I'm still here for it because I think that like her character in particular has like earned it. Like she's earned the right to be angry, you know?
There's
So,
something I want to talk about when we tackle like other pieces of media later that have it much more front and center. But
yeah.
it's like that feeling of just being able to yell like yes about
Yes.
something you know is like obviously wrong, but since it's fiction, you're kind of
Yeah.
allowed to just like indulge in that.
Yeah.
And like that is a lot of what Jade Fox's character is, and I think there's other things in which I would like to explore more, in which like that really comes to the forefront.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I think you're like right on the nail with like just how like cathartic her character can be in
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Probably in ways I can understand it, but you can probably know it and feel it in ways that I probably never could.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, I also
uh,
like just like Anya Taylor-Joy, I also have a thing for feminine rage. I think that women should be allowed to get angry without it costing their character everything. I've seen so many like media like breakdowns of like everybody started hating this character after they started ranting about everything. And I'm like, "No, that's not a rant. That's just an organic like reaction to when your life is fucking falling apart. And like maybe you should like nobody fucking and this is also like upsetting to me because I don't like it when like a male character's in only character trait is like being angry. Because the reason why it's not like quote unquote ladylike to be angry is because it's kind of considered a male trait.
mhm.
Like men have a monopoly on being angry because that's acceptable for them, but also like it's not fair for a dude's entire personality or character, you know, character composition to be anger and frustration. You know, nobody's upset with everything 100% of the time. And so I don't understand why it's like not okay for women to be upset a little bit, but also why it's okay for men to be upset all the time because it's just not fair for either side. You know what I mean? Like it's just not like nobody comes out of that like looking good. And
That's
yeah,
fair.
I don't know, but I'm spending a lot of time on Jade Fox. I know that we were like, I know you're like,
No,
we don't, we probably don't
I
have a lot to
think this
say.
is good because I did not catch a lot of these things, and I think like that's why I'm having a conversation with you about it.
Yeah,
That's why we do this podcast.
yeah,
We're gonna catch things that like that one or the other doesn't really catch.
yeah. But I liked her. I liked her a lot. I think that she's where she needs to be, and yeah, I like that she's mad. So let's move on to Mr. Lolo, Mr. Dark
Dark
Cloud,
cloud, low
Lolo,
man.
hanging low, low.
Uh, so I think for him, it's like, I use freedom a lot, but you use the word rebellion, which I think is a lot more accurate. Um, Maybe not even just rebellion, but like anti-society, like
Yeah,
outside of society,
yeah,
right? It's the word that's probably better, and like I think that's what Jade Fox and like Low are kind of representing, like the opposite of conformity,
yeah.
which now that I think about it, may not be freedom. Philosophical
Yeah,
conversations. This is the
yeah.
dialects happening. Um, so yeah, so Low is like the male version of like the outside of society, the opposite of conformity, right? And his life is like not as good as like Lee Moonbai's, but like in a lot of ways, it feels a lot better than definitely Jade Fox. Everyone's like coming out of this movie like more well off than Jade Fox, frankly. Um, but his life genuinely does feel like he leaves the movie with all some regrets, but a lot less than Shu Lien does, right?
Yeah.
So in this way, I think it's like a representation about like how even like in one of the worst outcomes for men. So it's like Lee Moon-bai is like one of the best outcomes for men, and then in that way, Low is like one of the worst outcomes for men, and he's still doing pretty good, still probably doing better
Yep.
than Shu Lien, right? Like he gets to still make a lot of his own decisions. He's not like he gets it like he doesn't have complete control over the plot the way that like Lee Moon-bai does, but he does still like have a lot more agency. He might not get everything he wants, but he's not like tragically broken about it at the end in the way that Shu Lien is, you know?
Yeah.
And I also think like that, and then there's the other aspect of him in which is like for someone who in any other movie would probably be like the hero. We talked about this earlier, but like he makes a lot of decisions that like would make you really uncomfortable, like that make me really uncomfortable at least, and I think would make a lot of audience members uncomfortable in like the way that he's really possessive about Jen, right? Like
Yup.
there's some pieces of dialogue where like Shu Lien like stops him and is like what makes you think she's gonna leave her life for you? And he's like, it's because she's mine, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of probably more valid ways to actually answer that question, right? And that's the way he goes about it, right? And there's
Yeah.
also another scene that
Yeah.
really stood out to me in the desert where I forget he's having a conversation with Jen and like he like drops like that bit of possessiveness in like a scene in which should feel romantic. He suddenly goes all possessive on it, right?
Yep.
And it's like I I think this is like a representation, like it's in the same way in which Lee Moon-bai is supposed to make you uncomfortable, so you can think about why you're uncomfortable. I think
Yeah.
Lowe's interactions with Jen and how he's viewing this relationship are supposed to also make you uncomfortable and like make you wonder like, why is this character who like by all rights should be like the hero, like why is he like making me so weirded out?
Yes. I think that you like hit everything that I wanted to talk about with him for sure. He's like you kind of want to be rooting for him because like Jen wants the kind of freedom and rebellion that he's offering her. And we see that in the flashback. Like he offers her a life that she thinks that she wants, you know, outside
Hmm.
of societal bounds. Like she's free to do whatever she wants. Like she genuinely cares about him and loves him, right? And so she gets to
Hmm.
spend the rest of her life not in some political marriage or tied to somebody that she doesn't want to be, but with like someone that she genuinely loves. And it's like, and then he pushes her away in the desert because he's like, you should go and like live your own life and like have the privileges that you were born to have. And then he comes back and he's like, no, she can't have anybody else because she's mine. And it's like, bro, you had your fucking chance and you blew it. Okay. Like, you don't get to be throwing a tantrum right now because it didn't go your way, because you had your way and you chose to discourage her from being with you. And even in the fact that, if we're acknowledging that he was like he expected to like become a great man and like officially ask her to marry him, that didn't end up happening, right?
Yeah.
Like he didn't do that. And so when he didn't do that, he should have realized that like it just wasn't going to happen, you know? But then he's like, I can't accept this. I can't accept the fact that I am mediocre. And she loved me when I was mediocre anyway. So it doesn't even matter that I'm mediocre. He like lets his little dick syndrome get the better of him. And he's like, no, she can't have anybody else. And it's like, dude, you had it.
Hmm.
You're just salty that you lost it and that it was literally your fault and nobody else is to blame for this, right? Like, get it
Yeah, and
together,
it's like
man.
it was like also going on like it just came to my head when you're talking about it, but also like about him like losing his chance. It's like, you know, earlier I was talking about how like men do not, by like the way the patriarchy work, have to think about how women feel, right? Like he is very much not appreciating the fact that like this has been a long time, things could have changed a lot, right? Like she is not the person like in the desert with you when you like pushed her away, right? And he just does not seem capable of putting himself into like Jen's shoes and like even imagining a reason why she would reject him at this point, you know?
Yep. And I mean, I again, like you kind of said, like you kind of want to root for him because in any other situation, he kind of would be the default hero. You know, he's like the guy in the romance movie who's like fighting tooth and nail for the woman that he loves. It's just the problem is that like he he got it. Like he got it at like the beginning of the movie, you know. In the grand scheme of things, the flashback happened probably in like the first, I don't even want to say like half. It was like the first third of the movie that flashback happened where we're like getting to know Jen and everything as well. And so like at the very beginning of the movie, we see him squander his opportunity. And so with that in mind, it's very hard for an audience to be like, yeah, like Jen and Lo should be together because that makes the most sense and they would be good together. It's like, no, dude, I watched you let her go. Like I watched you convince her to leave you. So I don't have any sympathy for you now that you're like trying to get her back. And also like you are very correct in saying that the specific language and rhetoric that he uses to justify his tantrums, like, she's mine, or like, we're meant to be together, and everything is just like, it just makes me roll my eyes so hard because I'm okay, well, if you were meant to be together, why did you tell her to go home? Like, this is your fault.
His fault.
I have like no sympathy for you at all. Um, I will say though, like he's cool also in getting compared to Lee Mubai as a character, because they don't really ever interact with each other. They don't ever have like a long conversation with one another. They don't ever fight with one another, so we don't really get to see any like specific character interactions between the two of them. But it's also very clear that Lo has been written in a very specific way to juxtapose the he's like the underdog, unlikely hero to Lee Bubai's like god status hero. Like
Hmm.
Lo is actually also the only person in the movie who has like a nickname that people know him by. Like he has a
That's true.
hero's name. He is called Dark Cloud. Like everybody knows Lee Bubai's name, but he doesn't have a badass nickname. You know what I mean? And so
Hmm.
in many ways, like
He,
Lo also has that like hero status, and he is like fighting for that and has that. It's just in a very different way than Lee Mubai has it, you know. So it's that's
yeah,
cool too.
you make a really good point because like he does have a legend around him. Lee Moon-bai has a legend around him. Shu Lin does not.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And Lo lives in a fucking cave, everybody. Like,
He's
like,
literally a caveman.
oh my god,
Literally
like
a
the way
caveman.
that this pisses me off so much. Shu Lien like owns her own business. She's a fucking badass, right? She is on par with like all of the other men around her. She's the person who fights the most probably throughout the course of the movie, other than like Jen, but that's just because Jen is like the main character. Like Shu Lien has the most fight time, screen time in this movie for sure, right? Like
Hmm.
she's always kicking ass. And yet, still, in the eyes of everybody around her, she's like a secondary character or like a side character or a co star to Lee Mubai's story, you know? Like, if it was from his perspective, she would just be his like badass love interest, you know? And that's so frustrating to me. Especially with Lo in the mix too, right? Just like you pointed out, like he also has like this badass nickname and has like legends and stuff around him, and we don't even ever see him like fight. Like we see him tackle with Jen for a little bit and like they wrestle in the
Very
sand.
uncomfortably.
Yeah, like really weirdly, and like it's and yeah, god. And even he has a legend status. It's just it's yeah, it's fucked. It's fucked the patriarchy. Oh my god, I'm so frustrated. Ugh. Ugh. God.
um. Okay, so we have been running this for a while, so I kind of do want to wrap it up. So the last character obviously is Jen, but I think understanding her is best understood by talking about the ending. So before I talk about the ending, I just want to know like how you feel about it before I like throw my spin on it.
Oh, uh like Jen or the movie as a whole?
The how the movie. I mean, I feel like those two are very intertwined.
That is true.
uh,
I have mixed feelings about Jen. I think I might need to rewatch the movie after having sort of talked about it and digested it with you as well. But at the beginning, she's a little bit. You could sort of just see her naivete. Like she just oozes like I don't know what I'm doing vibes, you know? Like
mhm.
especially when juxtaposed to Shu Lien, who is like very sure of herself, she knows what she wants, right? And Jen is basically begging to be validated by everybody around her constantly throughout the movie. Even one of her last lines in the movie is like, "Did you come here for the sword or for me?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
She's unsure of where she stands with everybody around her. She is constantly fighting to be validated by the people that she's trying to escape to. Like, she doesn't want to be with her parents, but also she wants to like prove to her parents that she can like be on her own and that she's self-sufficient. But the only way for her to prove that she is self-sufficient is by not being with her parents. And so it's this like weird like Ouroboros thing where she just can't like escape her environment because she's constantly trying to search for approval from people who will never validate her in the way that she wants to be validated. And even the
Mm-hmm.
people that she like could be validated in that way by either view her as a sex object, cough cough, limu bai, or view her as like an object to be owned, even if that is like even if they offer her the path of least resistance to rebellion, like low, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, her entire journey is frustrating, not just because her character is like kind of annoying and naive, but because the very nature of her journey is frustrating because she's fighting for things that, as an audience member, you can clearly see like the dramatic irony of like her chasing after something that she's never going to be able to achieve, just by virtue of the fact that like her surroundings are not built for people like her, you know? It's kind of tragic, and in many ways this is a hero's tragedy, right? Like, she technically dies at the end, right? I mean, as much as you want to believe like the little boy who jumped off the cliff and survived kind of thing, like she dies like at the end of the movie, and that's the end of her story, right? Is her giving up her life in order to be the hero of her own story. And that's tragic. Oh, that's very tragic, but also it's like there wasn't really anywhere else for her to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like 100% where I was like going with this, right? Like now you got it. You got it. Like
Yeah.
not much to add. Like I think some people may interpret the movie at the end where like she ends up with Lo. But I think like that makes no sense for the movie, frankly, because
Yeah.
like throughout the movie we're kind of showing that like he's actually not that great for her. None of the men in this movie are actually that great for her.
Yeah.
Um, or or no one in the movie is actually that great for her in general. Um, but like I don't think she ends up with him, and she does tell him to make the wish, but like the specifics of the myth is that the person jumping is the one that makes the wish, and they have to have faith,
Yeah.
right? Which is just not something she demonstrates, right?
Yeah.
So I think like that interpretation just doesn't work for me, and I think I have a feeling that might be a common interpretation, but I'm not sure. I'm with you on like the fact that she's just trapped, right? Like I think this movie has spent the whole movie exploring this like conformity versus like this like anti-conformity type thing, right? And it shows that like basically if you're a dude, you win. Either
Yep.
way you go, right? Or you win more if you conform, but you still win pretty well if you don't, right? But
Yeah.
if you're a woman, like it shows us between Shu Lian and Jade Fox how like you're in a lose-lose situation. You're just going to get screwed by the patriarchy, right? And like
Yeah.
I don't think the movie has a solution for it. It just kind of throws its hands in the air and just says, "Fuck it, I don't know,"
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
throws her off a cliff.
Yep.
Because like if you can't conform, but you also can't not conform, then like like it's a binary. Like you can only
Yeah.
do one or the other.
Yeah.
What do
There's
you
really
do?
nowhere for her to go, and therefore, like, if the story, like you said, like, if the story had ended with her being with Lo, that wouldn't make any sense, right? And if the
Mm-hmm.
story had ended with her, like, accepting conformity and, like, going and accepting the marriage and the arranged marriage and, like, living with her parents, that also wouldn't make any sense, right? It
Mm-hmm.
cheapens the rest of the journey.
Yeah.
While I do think that, like, I think it would have worked better. Like it would have made a little bit more sense if she had ended up with her parents, kind of in a like in a symbolic way of her like following Shu Lian's advice of like this is our place in the world right now and there's nothing that we can do to change that. I think that there is like important commentary to be made there if that was the choice that they ended up making for her. But I think the thing that
Mm-hmm.
makes the most sense is like fucking sucks to say, but like her dying, because there's nowhere for her to go where she's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
happy, right?
Yeah.
She just she can't, like, the world that she exists in right now was not built for people like her, and they aren't ready for people like her. And that's, Shulien, as amazing of a warrior as she has chosen conformity, right?
Mm-hmm.
She has actively lived her life this way. And if Shulien cannot do that, or or if Jen refuses to do that and cannot do that, then there's nowhere for her to go, you know.
Yeah.
So it's tragic, but like, throw her off a cliff. That's
Just
that's
just
where
to be
she
fair,
belongs.
just to be fair, I don't think the movie is like I don't think she particularly kills herself, and I don't think the movie's like glorifying suicide or saying that's the only way
Oh
out.
yeah, no,
Because like
yeah, no,
when she's like jumping off, it doesn't happen in a way that physically happens, right? She
yeah,
like starts gliding into the mist and then like a close up onto her face. Like this is there are ways in which you could have ended the movie that makes sense, but this is a purely, I think, in my opinion, a thematic, symbolic decision,
yeah,
right? What she does is not, I don't think she kills herself. What she's doing is like beyond sense itself, right? Like it is supposed to not make sense because the answer to this question of what to do doesn't make sense, right?
yeah,
Like if you're stuck in like this rock and hard place situation that you screwed, conform or not, the answer is literally a contradiction. Like the question is literally a contradiction. The answer cannot then make sense, and I think that's why the ending does not make sense.
yeah, yeah. But it was good. I mean, it's a great film. I encourage all of y'all to watch it. I know that our recaps are like extremely chaotic and they don't make a lot of sense. But I hope that like our analysis and our breaking down of it makes sense after you watch it and like digest it for yourselves. We do the recaps like that because to, I find it fucking
Fun.
hilarious. Like, I love doing that. I love like roasting the movie while I'm trying to summarize it, and also doing
Oh,
a
she's
really
roasting
bad
me.
job. Yeah, also roasting you at the same time. It all just works out in my favor, and I think it's really entertaining. I would hope that y'all agree. If you don't, then please let us know so we can make content that you guys actually enjoy. But no, it's a great film. It has a lot of good stuff in it, and even if you're just looking for like a cool action kind of romp, this also works for that as well. Like, you can read into it and it kind of displays things that should make you think, but at the end of the day, like, it's also just entertaining to look at because the choreographers and the costume design and the makeup team and the set designers, like, everybody did a
And Michelle
fantastic
Yeoh.
job. And Michelle Yeoh, and she's the only, like, she's like the only actor I know by name in that movie. But she just did a really good job. Yeah, everybody
They
did a
all
good
did.
job, but
They all
like
did.
particularly her, because she's like,
Maybe if
she's
you
my favorite.
speak Mandarin, you might disagree. But
Oh yeah.
for me not knowing, I think they all did a good job.
Yeah. Also, just like a few more trivia things about this movie, just to close us out, because I thought that would be kind of fun.
Okay.
So everybody did all of their own stunts. The graphics team were only used to edit out their safety wires, which I actually thought was really interesting because that means that like all of their effects were practical, not just like the running on the buildings. Like, so essentially like all the
Mm-hmm.
weapons and stuff that they were using, like throwing weapons and knives and everything, that was all practical. The director literally said like the only time the graphics were used was to like edit out the safety wires that held up the actors. So I thought that
It's
was
pretty
cool.
dope.
It really does kind of bring another element into like rewatching it, because then you can truly appreciate kind of what's going on. This film has won 4 Academy Awards.
Dang.
I did not know that.
I was not
It's
expecting that. I
yeah,
don't generally expect that
four
from
four Academy Awards. Interestingly enough, the Academy Awards that this movie won, those were actually presented to Taiwan, like the country. I didn't know that countries could win Academy Awards,
kind of an odd thing.
but apparently they can. It won like best foreign film, or best foreign picture or something like that, and like that award was awarded to Taiwan.
Interesting.
Yeah, isn't it kind of weird? Okay. We talked a little bit about like the like linguistic discrepancies and stuff. Of Ong Lee, who was the director, talked about how like he had to take like 30 plus takes sometimes for certain linguistic discrepancies, and it was really hard to get everybody on the same page. And Michelle Yeoh actually like talks about this in some of her press releases for the movie as well, where she was like, nobody knew what was going on. We were all just doing our best. I couldn't understand anybody. I was just reading off my script, or like I was just going off my own script. Like I couldn't really tell what other people were saying. I was just rehearsing, like I was just doing my own lines, which I think is actually really funny. Which also might lend a little bit more credence as to like why some of the conversation interactions are like slightly awkward. Also, so the woman who plays Jen, her name is Zhang Ji Yi. She commented on how films of this nature would help increase opportunities for Asian actors in the West, because this film particularly led to a boost in popularity for Wuxia films in America. This is the reason why Ip Man like blew up in the early 2000s and stuff as well. And so like, do you think she was right? Do you think that films like this increased opportunities for Asian actors in the West? Or do you think that like certain, like I feel like martial arts movies of this caliber too are like where we expect to see Asian actors. And so I'm wondering like what your thoughts on like balancing those two things kind of are, if you want to give your thoughts on that.
Like I said, like, well, first of all, I don't know too much about like the film history to know where this falls in place with like the other big hitters of like that time, like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like I'm not educated enough to say, but I do think there's something to be said about how like this movie's and theirs and like the whole martial arts boom in general did do a lot for Asian visibility, but only in specific types of media, right? Even to this day, right, Marvel makes Asian American film, and it's Shang-Chi. And like I love that movie, but there is something very poignant about it to say that it is a martial arts movie.
Yeah.
Right. The typecasting is very strong.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
there's also movement generally away from that. We got Crazy Rich Asians, which was like a really huge hit.
Yeah.
That other Asian American like teenage like romance film, I forget what it's called. We'll talk about one of these days. We did get Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a martial arts movie, but I also think it's way more than that.
Yeah.
But that is like a whole different conversation.
So you would generally agree with some caveats.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's what I expected you to say. I feel like that's our response to everything. We're like, I would generally agree, but here's like 10 more minutes of my thoughts on this.
On why I don't agree.
Yeah. Also, okay, so my last piece of trivia, which I actually thought was like fucking hilarious, but you know the Prince of Persia?
Yes.
You know how it started off as a video game and then became a god-awful movie with Jake Gyllenhaal in it?
Wait. Can I guess where this is going?
Yes.
Is the Prince of Persia based on Lo?
Yes.
It's so
Is that not like wild though? Is that not like kind of fucking crazy? Like this movie was the reason why Jake Gyllenhaal made the worst movie of his career, was because there was a character in this movie that the writer of Prince of Persia really liked and wanted to like make a story on that. Which, by the way, Lo is not Persian. Like what the fuck? Anyways, so yeah, and then Jake Gyllenhaal made the movie Prince of Persia. That's crazy.
So Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Lo goes to Prince of Persia.
The game.
Prince of Persia the game. Prince of Persia the game turns into is kind of the reason why we have Assassin's Creed the game, which is now why we have the weird Assassin's Creed film. So why we have that Assassin's Creed film? Thank Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
It was Lo all along.
It was Lo all along.
Yeah, he keeps fucking things up. The wedding parade was the last. It was not the last of his shenanigans.
Fair. This is actually very on like character.
Yes, this is very on brand for him to like go into something and just fuck everything up.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, better than you thought. Here we go. This is why.
Here we go.
This reason. None of like the last 2 hours is the reason why I think it's better than you thought. This is the reason.
We need to make like
This
a
is the buildup.
tree of convoluted things that Low has like influenced and caused. It's the Low multiverse. Oh god. I can't wait to speaking of multiverses, I cannot fucking wait to do Everything Everywhere All at Once. But I promised my mom that I would watch it with her, and she's in Korea right now, so I have to wait for her to get back.
I'm gonna warn you. That one's gonna be a hard one to watch with your mom.
Yeah, that's what you
Like,
told
actually,
me.
probably a lot of Asian parents and children are probably gonna have a hard time watching it together. You in particular with your mom might actually be very, very particularly.
All right,
difficult.
Odd. I didn't need that personal fucking call out. Damn. Well, I mean, I agree.
I'll remove it.
No,
But-
you're good.
but-
Keep it in because it's true. My mom listens to the podcast, so she needs to hear that.
Warning everyone involved.
Mom, I'm roasting you. No, my mom and I watched a show on Netflix called Would You Like a Cup of Coffee? And it's literally a show about like a little boy, like a college-aged boy who like works in a coffee shop and stuff. And like both of us were in tears watching that. And so I can't even imagine how the both of us are going to react to a show that is specifically about like the struggles of like Asian American immigrant parents and like how that affects their kids and like all of that. Oh my god, it's gonna be really intense, but yeah. Crouching
Oh.
Dragon, Hidden Tiger, yay!
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 Good movie.
Good
Oh, wait,
movie.
whoa, we gotta rank it. What are you
Oh
ranking it?
god, I'll give it a solid B plus.
I'm gonna go with an A.
Okay.
Like,
I think you
A
liked
minus or
it
A?
more than I did. I'm gonna give it I'm knocking it off from an A minus to a B plus simply because the smacky lip kiss scenes were so uncomfortable. And so I just, for the sake of my own sanity and the fact that I had to bleach my ears afterwards, I'm giving it a B plus. Yeah.
All right.
All of that
I
comes
think we're in the same range,
secondary. All of that comes secondary to like the patriarchy bad stuff in it. Like it's the smacky lip kiss stuff that was gross.
Also, something I didn't like mention because I was like deep in analysis mode that I like
Yeah.
the movie. I just like the fact that the plot kind of doesn't like go where you think it's gonna go.
Oh yeah.
A lot of the time. Like I have watched enough. I'm old. I have watched enough stuff at this point where like I can kind of get a sense of where things are going.
Yeah.
And then this movie goes from like a mystery into like this whole like different thing where right when you're like getting ready to accept what it is,
Yeah.
and like that type of surprise is just something like I love.
Yeah.
And I just don't, you just don't get that often because like
Yeah.
a good surprise probably shouldn't be happening that often.
Yeah. It's a very weird subversion of expectation because it's not like a plot twist per se. It's just that like it just wasn't going in the direction that you thought it was going to go, and it does it really well.
Yeah.
So I hope you guys enjoyed us talking about this for 2.5 hours.
And if there's anything you learned, it's be uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable. Ask yourself why you're uncomfortable.
Yes, please do. And go watch this movie. It's fucking good. Also Michelle Yeoh. So, yeah.
This podcast was produced by Yeji.
It was created and written by both of us.
It was edited by me.
And the cover art was done by my good friend Emma Nebecker.